brothers in oath. It has been a long day, and Temujin is very tired, but that is unimportant. He looks at the arrow he has just been given and tries to remember if he has ever seen anything as beautiful before. The arrow is far more decorated than all the others he has seen, and he has seen a lot of arrows. After all, his father is the Khan, and not just any Khan, but the most powerful and feared for many days' ride. His yurt is full of the most splendid bows and arrows hanging on the walls. Often other tribes come to visit. These tribes have beautiful weaponry too, not just spears, shields, and glinting swords, but artfully carved bows and even more exquisite arrows. So far, he has never seen an arrow like this one. It is longer than his arm, not as long as the arrows the men use, but at least 2 hands longer than the ones he and the other boys use to practice, and the carvings are so detailed that he's almost afraid to touch it. The arrowhead is not made of iron, but of bronze. This makes it weak and practically useless against anything with even thick fur, let alone against hardened leather or plate armour. Then again, this kind of arrow is not intended to be used like that. The soft metal has been engraved with artful lines and symbols, and the edges have been so carefully polished and sharpened that it could probably split a hair in half. As he looks at it, Temujin is ashamed. It is beautiful, he says. I've never seen anything so beautiful. You are a true artist. Chuzir pulls a face, as if Temujin has just said something indecent or spoken badly of the gods. He too holds an arrow in his hand, the one that Temujin has given him in return for this stunning work. He is almost convincing as he pretends to admire it, even if there is very little to admire. It is a completely normal arrow, short and not even entirely straight. Temujin has polished the iron head as much as he can, and added a few simple carvings with as much skill as his clumsy fingers allow. Chuzir is kind enough not to say anything about it. I am no artist, answers Chuzir after a noticeable pause, and in an almost offended tone of voice. Soon I shall be a warrior, he adds, with a sideways glance in Temujin's direction, although I shall never be a Khan, of course. He says these last words reproachfully. But this arrow, says Temujin. I did not make it, interrupts Chuzir. It was old man Shezen who did the carving. In return, I helped him collect firewood and peat for 3 moons. He looks at Temujin. Do you not like it? Of course, says Temujin quickly. It's wonderful, but my own arrow is so... He stops, embarrassed. But Chuzir just laughs and jabs him in the ribs so hard that Temujin will start crying if he does not stop himself with all the strength he has. That's not the point, says Chuzir, laughing, because you probably needed just as much time to carve it as I spent helping that rip-off merchant Shezen carry wood whilst he sat by the fire keeping himself warm. Perhaps that is true, thinks Temujin. Nevertheless, he is ashamed of the gift. If this were someone else, he would suspect them of trying to embarrass him by making such an exaggerated gift. But not Chuzir. Chuzir is his best friend, his only friend even, despite the fact that he is the Khan's son. Or perhaps it is because he is the Khan's son. "Come on," says Chuzir, jabbing him in the ribs again. "Let's go and try them out." Just the very idea of shooting this exquisite arrow and perhaps damaging it fills Temujin with horror. But Chuzir has already turned on his heels and run off, so Temujin follows him. He runs as fast as he can, but he just cannot keep up with Chuzir and will probably lose him. Chuzir sees that his best friend is having trouble and slows down, then stops entirely. Nevertheless, Temujin is completely out of breath when he too gets to the top of the hill. Chuzir does not say anything, but he cannot stop himself from grinning. Not that he tries for one moment either. "I bet I get to the trees before you," Chuzir says. He is not even breathing heavily, while Temujin's lungs are burning like fire, and his heart is beating so hard he thinks it might burst. "What a cheek," thinks Temujin to himself, and then he turns to Chuzir. "Why don't you just tell me what I have to do for you?" he asks grumpily. "After all, I shall have to do it anyway when I lose the bet, so I might just as well save my strength." Chuzir grins and makes as if to jab him in the ribs again, but he just runs around and starts strolling towards the woods. Temujin follows, cursing himself for what he has just said. Of course, Chuzir will never tell anyone anything about it. Temujin is his friend after all, and they are about to become brothers in oath. Yet if one of the other boys has heard what he has said, then it will just lead to more rumours in the village, and his father will not like that at all. He will have to be more careful about what he says. The two young warriors reach the trees at the same time. Chuzir takes his bow from his shoulder, loads it with Temujin's arrow, and inspecting it closely, draws it halfway back. There he holds it, waiting until Temujin too has cocked his bow. He nods the signal to shoot, and then draws back his bow in a movement as smooth as it is strong. "Forever," he says. "Forever," echoes Temujin. Their arrows fly off with a twin crack. Despite being too short, bent, and warped, Temujin's arrow, sped by Chuzir's bowstring, flies almost twice as far as the richly decorated work of art that he himself has shot off. It must have flown at least 200 paces, perhaps even 300, before burrowing into the ground halfway between the trees and the river bank. "Forever," says Chuzir once again, and this time, too, Temujin echoes him. Chuzir is beaming. A warm feeling comes over Temujin, accompanied nevertheless by a strange feeling of emptiness, almost of disappointment. So now they are brothers in oath. They have been talking about it since last summer, and have made preparations accordingly, and somehow he expected it to be, well, more dramatic. Taking an oath together is more than being brothers by birth. It means being bound together forever, being two parts of a whole who just happen to live in two different bodies. From this day forth, he will be willing to give his life to protect his brother if need be, and he expects this thought to be somehow elevating. Shouldn't the earth quake and the heavens open? Shouldn't there at least be a thunderclap and a few flashes of lightning? Yet there is nothing, of course. Chuzir embraces him briefly and then turns away brusquely. Let's go and get the arrows. They do not run this time, but Chuzir has almost twice as much ground to cover as Temujin to reach his arrow, and for some reason Temujin does not want to follow him. He pulls the precious arrow from the ground and wipes it down carefully. Suddenly, he has an intense feeling of being watched. Perhaps the other young warriors had found out what they were doing. Temujin turns round and stiffens. His hunch is true, except that he is not just being watched, he is being stalked. It's a dog, almost as big as a foal, but far heavier. It is a shaggy-coated monstrosity with huge teeth dripping with yellow slaver, and it is standing about 10 paces behind him at the edge of the forest, staring at him. Temujin can feel his heart faltering. He hates dogs and is afraid of them more than anything else in the world. He grips the arrow tighter, but although his life might now depend on it, something seems to be stopping him from drawing the bowstring. The dog might kill him. Perhaps it does not want to, but it can, and this thought is more than he can bear. "Temujin, shoot!" cries Chuzir at almost the same moment as he releases his bowstring. The arrow whizzes past Temujin's cheek, stroking him with its feathers. As the arrow hits the ground just over a man's length away from the dog, it lets out a frightened yelp and runs off with its tail between its legs. "Temujin, shoot!" shouts Chuzir again. "What are you waiting for?" Temujin hears Chuzir's steps and sees the huge dog bolting like a hare towards the trees and disappearing into the undergrowth. Chuzir reaches him, tears the arrow from his fingers, and faster than Temujin's eyes can follow, loads it into his bow. He draws the string back behind his ear, and then he lets out a moan as he drops the bow. The dog is gone. "Why did you do that?" he asks angrily. "Why didn't you shoot?" Because the arrow," stutters Temujin. Chuzir looks at him with a frown, and Temujin continues to speak with a nervous smile. "I was afraid of breaking it, as it is so valuable." This only makes Chuzir angrier, but he says nothing more, pressing his lips together out of rage and stomping off past him to fetch his dart. Temujin knows what will happen in the night. The dragon will come to him and show him what he has missed. The Dream Dragon. Temujin goes to bed unusually early this evening. Most evenings his mother has to tell him to go and leave the men to sit round the fire in peace, as is their right. All too often he stays up until his father puts his foot down. Only then does he do as he is told, and goes into his little yurt pitched right next to his father's tent. He has been sleeping alone here since last summer. Today, however, he cannot wait to go. He gulps down his dinner, makes an excuse, and goes to bed before sunset. As is always the case when trying to sleep, it takes a long time for him to sink into slumber. He has barely fallen asleep when Sarantoya comes to him. Just like every time, Temujin feels her presence more than he sees it. Well, in the first moments, in any case. It is something big, infinitely soft, but also infinitely old and strong, that steals into his dreams and only slowly takes on a form. "I haven't seen you for a while," he says. "I didn't feel that you needed me," answers Sarantoya. The shadowy figure in his dream starts to become clearer. At the edge of his consciousness, something big, something ancient, stirs, glinting like moonlight on silver scales. It touches his soul. He feels warmth and comfort, and thinks he almost sees something. Almost. "Why did you do that?" asks Temujin. Sarantoya squints, as the moonlight in the dream breaks on her scales and then flows down her flanks, jingling lightly, as if somewhere far away 1,000 cymbals are being struck. It is always night in Temujin's dreams when Sarantoya comes to him, and there is always a full moon. He has stopped being surprised by it. "What did you say?" she asks him. Temujin has to force himself not to get angry. Despite her huge claws and sharp fangs, Sarantoya hates strong feelings like anger and fury. She is the most peaceful creature Temujin has ever come across. "You know very well what I mean," he says, just managing to keep control of himself. "That dog! Why did you stop Chuzir killing it?" "Did I?" replies Sarantoya, pretending to be surprised. Then she laughs quietly. It sounds like thunder rolling in the mountains on the horizon. "What if your friend Chuzir just missed?" "Nonsense," replies Temujin. "Chuzir is the best shot I know. He never misses his target." "Not even with a bent arrow?" says Sarantoya mockingly. Temujin ignores this comment. "He never misses his target," he insists. "Well then, it must be that somebody wanted him to miss," says Sarantoya, smirking. "You!" "No," says the dragon, suddenly in a very serious tone of voice. "I would never do anything you do not want, and you know it." Temujin says nothing more. Chuzir said nothing after missing. He simply walked on for a few moments, offended. The way he looked at Temujin showed that he knew exactly who he blamed for his unusual failure. Perhaps Chuzir actually knows that it is Temujin's fault. Temujin has already told him once about his dream dragon, but Chuzir's reaction was such that Temujin has never mentioned it again. It was years ago now, and Temujin does not know if Chuzir remembers it at all, but you just never know. "You didn't really want to kill the dog," continues Sarantoya after a while. "But I was afraid of him," answers Temujin. "I know," says Sarantoya with a sigh. "But you don't need to kill everything you were afraid of. Do you remember the first time you saw me?" "Of course I do." "You were afraid of me, too." "No, I wasn't," claims Temujin, although this is a downright lie. He almost died of fright the first time the dragon appeared to him in a dream. "So," continues Sarantoya, "did you want to kill me because of that?" "Of course not, answers Temujin, outraged. I would never kill anything that hasn't done you any harm, says Sarantoya, finishing his sentence for him. I know. If it were any different, I would never have come to you. Temujin does not really understand what she is saying, but he isn't in the mood to ask questions. Sarantoya says many odd things that he does not understand. What do you want? He asks reluctantly. For once, Temujin's anger seems to amuse Sarantoya. Perhaps because she too feels that, in reality, it is only directed against himself. Really, it should be me asking you these questions, she answers. If I remember correctly, you were the one who called me, and not the other way round. Since I'm here anyway, tomorrow is a big day for you, a very important day. Temujin thinks as hard as he can. Tomorrow? Tomorrow? How so? He asks sceptically. It's a surprise, says Sarantoya, teasing him. You will meet someone who will become very important to you. Who? Asks Temujin. Yet Sarantoya does not even answer. She disappears with a silvery, bright laugh. The Warrior. His father, Tamer, wakes him the following morning before the sun has come up. This is nothing unusual. Most people in the village get up before dawn, and only very rarely does Temujin sleep past sunrise. If he does, it is mostly when his father has been up too long drinking or discussing matters with the other men, both of which have the same result. What is unusual, however, is his father's grumpy mood and his even grumpier face. This is the first thing Temujin sees as he opens his eyes. Tamer is a great warrior, no doubt, who has killed many enemies and brought the tribe to respect and riches, but at the bottom of his heart he is a friendly man, a gentle one, especially where his son is concerned. This morning, however, he is not at all gentle. In fact, he seems furious as he grasps his son's shoulder and shakes him roughly to wake him. If Temujin were not as sleepy, he would understand that his father really is furious. He rubs his eyes and looks astonished as his father goes back to the small entrance to the tent and motions him to follow. Just like every morning, they look after the horses and drive the sheep onto the pasture without saying a single word to one another. Then they go down to the river to wash themselves in the icy waters of the Bman. Then his father breaks the uncomfortable silence. Chuzir told me about the dog, he says, his voice full of reproach. Temujin looks at him. He is not quite sure what Chuzir has told his father, and so saying nothing is probably the cleverest thing to do. His father sighs deeply. When are you going to finally become a man, my son? He asks. You are my only son, Temujin, and one day you will take my place and become Khan. But how will you be able to do that if you are still a mere boy? Temujin does not answer. His father does not want an answer. He can feel this, and this is not the first time they have had this talk. Tamer may not yet have said it as directly as he has now, but Temujin knows very well that it is a great source of pain to him that his only son will not grow into the great warrior he wants him to be. Temujin may be a passable bowman, may be a good rider, and may just about know how to handle a sword and shield, but that is not enough. The other boys are better than he is, even the younger ones. It is not so much a question of his ability, his skill, or even his courage. It is just that he doesn't like weapons. He has never really understood where the glow in the eyes of the warriors comes from when they speak of all the enemies they have slain. "Chuzir told me," says his father, picking up where he left off, "that you were scared stiff of the dog as it stood in front of you." "It was a very big dog," answers Temujin, "and it was very dangerous." This must have been the wrong answer, because Tamer's face becomes even darker. "Did it attack you?" he asks. Temujin keeps silent. His father turns suddenly and walks back towards the village with such big strides that Temujin has to struggle not to fall back. His father does not look at him as he starts talking again. "Dogs, Temujin, are, after horses, our most loyal friends. They help us to watch our sheep, to keep our food supplies free of rats, and they warm us in winter when the fire no longer burns enough. There is no need to be afraid of them." "But it was growling at me," says Temujin in his defence. He is not sure if this was actually the case, and it is clearly not the answer that Tamer wants, because now he is really furious. "But it didn't attack you, did it? And even if it had, you would have had to have killed it like a warrior. You had your bow with you, didn't you?" "Yes," answers Temujin dejectedly. "I am sorry, father." "Be silent!" shouts Tamer. "You are the son of a Khan. You shall never say you are sorry to anyone about anything, not even to me. If you make a mistake, be sure not to do it again, but never apologize." "Yes, father," replies Temujin. He almost adds, "I am sorry." They cover the rest of the way back to the village in silence. As they reach it over the hill, the village is now wide awake and busy at work. They hear children shouting, an ox mooing, and in the distance the thunder of horses' hooves. When they get to Tamer's yurt, which, as is his right, is the biggest in the village, big enough to take in all the men in the entire tribe, they find it empty. This is unusual, and Temujin wants to leave the tent and go about his daily work, which he has now neglected too long. But Tamer calls him back with a lordly movement of his hand and gestures him to stand in the middle of the tent. Temujin is confused, but obeys his father. His heart is beating hard. He has been hoping that this is all over, but it seems that his father has not finished yet. Perhaps what Tamer has just said is only the beginning. His heart starts to beat even faster, and he clenches his fists so that his father does not see how badly his fingers are shaking. Tamer is moving around behind him, and Temujin asks himself what he is actually doing. He does not dare to turn around, but keeps staring at the ashes of the fire. Finally, his father returns and throws something to the ground in front of him. It takes Temujin a while to recognize it as the full outfit and weaponry of a warrior. There is a leather tunic and belt, a fine woven chain-mail shirt, boots with artfully engraved metal plates, a breastplate and shield, a precious bronze helmet, and a broad, decorated weapon belt wrapped around a beautifully forged sword. There is everything he needs to be a warrior. "Put it on," says Tamer. Temujin obeys his father, but he is becoming more and more nervous. He knows of the existence of warriors' clothing because Tamer has told him about it. His father always stresses that it is reserved for very special occasions, and Temujin has never seen it before. He does not dare ask questions, but looks quizzically at his father while putting on the outfit. Finally, Tamer breaks the silence himself. "Today is a special day," he begins, and watches closely every movement Temujin's nervous hands make. "And I want you to make a good impression. Behave yourself, and do not bring shame upon our clan or upon me, your father. And do not worry, I have told our warriors to chase all the dogs out of the village until our visitor has left." Temujin feels his ears going red and sinks his head in shame. "Who is coming to visit?" he asks nonetheless. "My brother in oath, Bman, the Khan of the Voshon tribe," answers Tamer. "Have you heard of them?" "Yes, father," answers Temujin quietly. The Voshon? Of course he has heard of them, as well as of Bman, their wise and mighty Khan. Bman became his father's brother in oath when he and Tamer were the same age as Temujin and Chuzir are now. The Voshon tribe has far more land than Tamer's tribe and is much, much richer. It is told that their herds are so big that if all their horses were to be driven together at once, they would cover the steppe from horizon to horizon. The Khan's yurt is said to be covered in pure gold. Despite this wealth and power, it is told that they are a very peaceful tribe, and many warriors laugh at them, as long as Tamer is not around to defend the honor of his brother in oath. Temujin buckles his sword belt and then reaches for his helmet. He thinks for a moment about whether to put it on now, but then decides against this and puts it under his left arm. His father eyes him for a moment, looks him up and down, and then nods his approval. "And what is so important about this visit for me?" asks Temujin. "Who am I meeting?" Tamer looks at him surprised, and Temujin wants to slap himself in the face for having asked this question. It is Sarantoya who has told him that he will meet somebody who will affect his future, not his father. He has said nothing. He looks at Temujin for 2 or 3 heartbeats in a way that makes Temujin really very uncomfortable. Then, however, he answers his son's question. "You are old enough now, my son, and soon you will be a man. It is time to find you a wife." "A wife?" Temujin is beyond surprised. He was ready for anything, just not that. "But "You are old enough, my boy," interrupts Tamer. "At your age, I was already married. Bman is bringing his daughter, Arbessa. She is just 1 year younger than you, and, so I have heard tell, very beautiful. And of course a link between our tribes would be to everyone's advantage." "But I don't know this girl at all," protests Temujin. As he has expected, his father's face darkens. Moments later, however, a sudden and unusually gentle smile spreads across his face. "Son, I would never force you to marry anyone you do not want to, but have a look at her at least. I ask for no more than that, and perhaps you will like her. She will definitely like you, I'm very sure of that." Temujin looks quizzically as Tamer stops talking and bends down to pick up a polished silver plate left from the previous evening's feast. There are streaks of dried sheep's milk and bits of food stuck to it, but Temujin can still see his own reflection in the mirror and understands what his father means. He really does look like a warrior, magnificently equipped and wild, with his hair braided, his strong features, and his lively light blue eyes. Who would be able to resist him looking like this? Temujin is about to make a jokey remark about this when he thinks he feels movement behind him. It is a kind of golden shimmering, like moonlight breaking on polished scales. He quickly checks behind himself, but sees nothing. When he looks back at the plate, however, he sees Sarantoya reflected behind him, this time even more clearly than in his dream. She looks at him, and she too sees the warrior which this wonderful armour, sword, and helmet have made him into. The big gold dragon looks sad. New arrival. Bman does not come until the sun is well past its highest point. Nevertheless, as befits someone of his rank, he travels with a large entourage. Several riders have arrived before him to give advance notice of his arrival. The whole village gathers to welcome him fittingly. Temujin, of course, has a place in the first row, right next to his father and the other warriors. However, Temujin does not start towards the group until the baggage train can be seen on the hills in the west. He is not in much of a hurry to get there, and in even less of a hurry to meet either his father's brother in oath or his daughter. He has got nothing against girls, and knows as well as the next man that the children of tribal chiefs get married to each other in order to increase their power and to secure an often all too insecure peace. He should not be surprised that his turn has now come. He has simply believed that he has a little more time, perhaps another summer, maybe 2. Of course, he will not dare to defy his father, but he has mixed feelings about this meeting with his father's brother in oath and, above all, the daughter. As befits their status, the other boys, including Chuzia, wait at an appropriate distance behind the warriors and the elders, yet in front of the women still. Temujin has to walk past them in order to join his father on time. He ignores the other boys, as usual, but greets Chuzia and is about to set off even faster. Yet he notices Chuzia's dark expression of face, and turns round to him, his brow furrowed quizzically. Chuzia avoids his gaze, and turns away. "What is wrong?" asks Temujin bluntly. He is confused. "Nothing," replies Chuzia curtly. Temujin stretches his hand out so as to seize him by the shoulder, but Chuzia steps back quickly, and Temujin pulls back his arm. He feels a faint but deep stabbing pain in his chest. Chuzia is his brother in oath. "You must hurry, Temujin," says one of the other boys. "Otherwise you, our future Khan, will arrive too late to greet your bride." Temujin flashes his eyes at the boy, but does not say anything. Ilan, the boy, is 2 heads taller than him, and doesn't like him. Temujin dislikes him too, and feels that he will have to fight him one day. Yet he does not want it to be now, so he offers Ilan nothing more than a contemptuous look and makes to go on. Ilan, however, continues in a mocking tone. "Don't you worry, we will make sure that nothing else gets in the way of our future Khan and his bride. Woof, woof." This comment was followed by laughter from all around, and Temujin feels a sudden fury so strong that he wants to jump at the bigger boy and pummel him. Yet his fury dies away as quickly as it comes, and gives way to something very different and much, much worse. His eyes fill with burning tears, and he turns back to Chuzia. He steps so close to him that no one else can hear him speak. "Why did you tell them about it?" he whispers. His voice is shaking. Chuzia avoids his gaze again. Temujin waits for him to answer the question, but he says nothing. So Temujin turns away angrily, and walks away as quickly as he can without running. Behind him the boys are laughing, and a few of them bark again. Temujin keeps his back turned to them, but it costs him all the strength he has to hold back the tears. His father seems very angry when he arrives next to him, but he does not have the time to say anything to him because, in that moment, the baggage train is coming by. Tamer simply looks at his son angrily, in a way that seems to promise punishment later. Then he straightens his shoulders and gets ready to greet his guests. Bman is an older, white-haired man with a white beard that reaches his chest. He has a weather-beaten face and exudes an aura of dignity and power that you can almost reach out and grasp. Temujin has often met men who have great power, including his father, of course. But Bman differs from them in one important point. He's the first chief he has ever met who does not carry a weapon. His large entourage, too, is mostly unarmed. Just the 2 knights right and left of him have spears held upright in their hands, and it looks to Temujin somehow as if they only have them to tie their pennants to, which are fluttering above their heads in the wind. Tamer greets his noble guest effusively, using the complicated and wordy greetings common to his people. Temujin uses this time to have a closer look at the many people accompanying the Khan of the Voshan. Of course, there is a very particular person he is looking for, and he finds her a little behind Bman, flanked by 2 knights who, contrary to his first impressions, are heavily armed. She is slender, wrapped up in exquisite garments, and about a hand shorter than him. She has to be Arbessa, his future wife. Her face is veiled, so he cannot quite recognize its features, but he thinks he sees her keen stare through the material and quickly looks away. The greeting ceremony goes on for quite some time, but eventually it is over, and Bman makes a brief gesture, allowing his entourage to sit. Milk, as well as other stronger drinks, are offered, along with a meal, and suddenly the ceremonial silence, previously broken only by the exchange of formalities between the Khans, gives way to general laughter and pats on the shoulder as the more than 30 riders start to mix with the population of the village. Arbessa, too, slips down from her horse with a smooth movement, yet Temujin does not find the right moment to approach her, or even to look at her. Taimur puts his hand on his shoulder and pushes him in between himself and Bman. "This is my son, Temujin," he says. The old Khan looks at him with his strangely soft eyes for a few instants. Despite the tangible aura of softness and goodness he exudes, Temujin, who is already very uncomfortable, is almost afraid of him. Then the Khan smiles suddenly. "So, you are Temujin," he says. "I have heard a lot about you. I am told that you are a son who is every bit as honourable as his father. Is this true?" Temujin does not know what to answer, and simply lowers his head in shame. In this situation, this is almost an insult. Taimur is horrified and sucks in air sharply past his teeth. Bman, however, just laughs, quietly and benevolently. "Well, I see he really is his father's son. My brother in oath was never one for too many words." Taimur laughs, but even his laugh sounds hollow, and he puts another hand on Temujin's shoulder. It is as if he is showing Temujin off as his own property, and Temujin finds this degrading. He does not say anything, however, and keeps looking for Arbessa. The girl has already gone past him without even looking at him, as it seems to him, and is now talking with the women. The men of the tribe, too, have mingled with the village people and are eating, joking, and drinking with them. The big reception has dissolved into nothing. Only his father and his father's brother in oath are still standing, trying to look important, but they are clearly not succeeding. Taimur clearly finds the situation embarrassing. Bman looks amused by it all. Finally, he clears his throat and gestures towards the big yurt in the middle of the village. "It was a long and tiring journey, old friend, and I am thirsty. We have not seen each other for many years, and have much to talk about." And talk they did. Arbessa. Having gone to bed so early the evening before, Temujin ends up going to bed very late tonight. A huge feast is being given in honour of the guests, starting just before sundown and going on until far past midnight. Almost all of the clansmen are in Tamer's tent, eating, talking, and drinking. The women are barely able to keep up with serving food and drinks. With all the delicious food and with the hours that pass, the feasting becomes ever more boisterous, and the men's tongues become looser. The camp echoes to the sounds of laughter and music and the happy voices of the men as they try to outdo each other with amazing stories. Everyone knows that only half of the stories are actually true, but that does not stop them being listened to intently and greatly enjoyed. Temujin spends the feast sitting at his father's right-hand side, listening to the stories that the clansmen are so happily embellishing, but he cannot fully concentrate on the proceedings. His gaze keeps wandering over to the veiled girl next to Bman, and when he is not looking at her, he thinks he can feel her eyes on him. At the beginning, it is an unpleasant feeling. He does not like being stared at without being able to see the face of the person staring. After a while, however, it just feels slightly odd. He is curious to have a look behind the veil. But apart from the fact that this is not the done thing, he doesn't allow himself to make such a request. It is long past midnight when, from outside the yurt, they hear the typical sound of swords clashing. Tamer stops talking to his brother in oath without finishing his sentence, and then jumps up and hurries out of the tent. Everyone else, including Bman and of course Temujin, follow suit. Outside the tent, a fight is going on between one of Arbessa's bodyguards and a man from the village. At least, that is the way it seems at first. Swords clash and spray sparks. Light breaks on shimmering metal and the links in chainmail vests. The two men seem to be carrying out a bizarre and speedy dance around each other, exercising themselves in sword-fighting techniques like parries and feints, whilst the blades smash into their shields. No blood has yet been spilled, as Temujin quickly recognizes, and none will be. The two men are laughing as they fight. Arbessa's bodyguard could land a hit on the leg of the man fighting him, but turns the blade at the last moment so that it hits him flat. This hurts, but is not dangerous. The onlookers whoop and clap, whilst Ilan's father, as Temujin recognizes him uncomfortably, hops around on one leg, swearing, and then lunges at his opponent all the more bitterly. Temujin too suddenly hears himself cheering on the two fighters as he hears a high-pitched voice next to him. "What do you men find so exciting about playing war?" "Well, because it's just," says Temujin. Then he stops himself in mid-flow and turns round to see who has said this. It is Arbessa. She has removed her veil and is looking down at the two fighters with an expression somewhere between quizzical and derogatory. She has the most beautiful face that Temujin has ever seen. "Yes?" she asks, turning round to him. Temujin looks into her crystal-clear, almost uncannily light eyes. These eyes awaken something in him whose existence he has not known until that moment. It is as if his throat has been tied up. "Well, because it's, he stutters. Arbessa's eyes flash in a way that can only be described as scoffing. I understand. Because men just do that kind of thing, right? She laughs. We all know that. The question is, why? In order to measure their strength, and be ready when they come up against the enemy, answers Temujin automatically. He feels stupid, and Arbessa probably thinks he is stupid too, because the scorn in her eyes continues to grow. The enemy, she repeats. Which enemy? Before Temujin has the chance to answer, she does it herself. It doesn't matter much. There's always an enemy around, isn't there? Her eyes look at Temujin as intently as if she were looking at him for the very first time. Something in her gaze stabs at Temujin's heart like a thin needle. You too look like a real warrior, but perhaps a little small, she says, and covers her face back up with her veil, turns around abruptly and walks back to the yurt with quick steps. Temujin looks confused and hears a cheerful peal of laughter behind him. A hand comes down on his shoulder, and as he looks up, he is looking directly into Bman's bearded face. The old Khan smiles, almost mischievously. "Yes, well, you've met my daughter now, then," he says. "Do you still like her?" Temujin says nothing. What can he say? And just looks up at Bman, taken aback. He takes his hand off of Temujin's shoulder and motions with his head for Temujin to follow him. "Come, let us step together." Temujin looks helplessly at the two fighters. They have not come anywhere near finishing, and yet it is a question of the honour of the tribe. That does not seem to bother the old Khan, however, who walks off slowly, away from the light and shouts and noise of the friendly tussle. Temujin is not sure how long it will stay friendly. He knows Ilan's father well, and he does not like losing. "Please do not be upset at Arbessa," says Bman once they have walked a while. "She is still young, and speaks freely and from the heart. She will soon learn to consider her words better." "I'm not upset at her," says Temujin hurriedly. "She is a girl, after all." "And a very pretty one, eh?" adds the father. Temujin feels himself going red. He does not know why, but he lowers his head and hopes that Bman does not notice. "She is still a child," continues the old Khan in an amused tone of voice, from which Temujin understands that he has noticed his blush. "But we can see that she will soon be a good-looking young woman. If she takes after her mother, she will be a real beauty. By the same token, she will be fiercely independent." He laughs. "You can think yourself lucky to get a woman of her caliber, if you want her." He stands still and examines Temujin with a changed but still not unfriendly gaze. "So, do you want her?" "But of course," answers Temujin hastily. "My father has told you how important this alliance is for our two tribes, and how I am his oldest and best friend, and his brother in oath. The important thing, however, is what you and Arbessa want. Do you want this to happen?" Temujin does not answer straight away, and when he does, he answers so openly that he surprises himself. "I do not know, my lord. I mean, I do not know her yet. She is very pretty, but—" "I understand," sighs Bman. He does not seem upset at all. In fact, he almost sounds relieved, even if Temujin does not quite understand why. "Then again, this is the reason we are here." He gestures towards the tent to which his daughter has walked back. "Arbessa is waiting for you in your tent. Go to her and get to know her better. We shall stay for a few days, and if you still think she is the right one for you, and she thinks you are the right one for her, then you will return with us and spend the rest of the year at our village." He smiles warmly. "Now, get going. If I know my daughter, she doesn't like being kept waiting." The Prophecy. He does not go straight back to his tent, but stops by the fight to see how it ends. It lasts for some time and gets ever more bitter. Well, at least Ilan's father becomes more bitter. There is some blood, too, even though the wounds are only small, harmless cuts. But Temujin is pleased when Taimur and Bman step in and declare the fight a tie. Belmin's warrior looks happy and laughs as he embraces his opponent. Ilan's father is clearly unhappy, however, and Temujin sees that he would quite happily take his sword and finish the fight if the two Khans were not there. The first fight is followed by others between Belmin's men and village warriors. Most are just harmless tussles. The two Khans, as well as most of the men, return to the fire to continue the celebrations, and Temujin sits down with them without having been asked. To judge by the look his father gives him, he does not like this, but he says nothing, and lets Temujin sit next to him for far longer than usual. Not long before morning, Temujin finally gets up and goes to his yurt. He can almost feel the strange looks Bman gives him, like a warm hand between his shoulder blades. It is dark and warm in his tent as he enters the tent. He has been hoping he will find Arbessa asleep, and her regular shallow breathing seems to confirm this hope. Temujin does not make a light, and tries to undress without making any noise. The metal on his suit of armour makes this impossible, however. It clinks and rattles. Arbessa's breathing does not change. But when he slips under the warm sheepskin and carefully lies down back to back with her, she raises her head and speaks. "So, all the fights are over, and the great warrior returns tired from battle." Her voice is quiet, derogatory, and not at all sleepy. Temujin grounds his teeth in anger, not so much at Arbessa's words, but at himself for actually believing that he would get off so lightly. His reason tells him to say nothing and pretend to be asleep. But this is perhaps the first, and definitely not the last time, he realizes how pointless it is to use a word like reason when talking to a woman. "It was just a bit of fun," he answers without raising his head. "Yes, of course. I think it's great fun to watch two men going at each other with sharp iron blades and hitting each other until they bleed," she replies. This makes Temujin very angry, but he does not really know with whom he is so angry. He remains silent for a few moments. Then he sits up shoves the sheepskin to the side, and feels around in the dark until he finds a flint and the small oil lamp. He is so angry that his hands are trembling, and it takes him 5 or 6 attempts to get the wick. Once he has finally succeeded, he is still clumsy enough to burn his fingers on the tiny flame. Arbessa's eyes glint with disdain as he turns to her. She, too, has sat up and pushed the cover down to her knees. She is wearing nothing more than a very thin dress, through which Temujin can see almost everything. It embarrasses him. He looks down. "Why are you so shy, great warrior?" asks Arbessa tauntingly. Temujin says nothing in reply, but feels himself going red again. "You are not embarrassed, are you?" continues the girl, pretending to blink in surprise. "I mean, I don't know much about the customs of your people, but isn't it usual for the warrior to return to his woman after a successful day's battling and lie with her?" He does not answer. After a brief pause, she adds, "Well, if they've survived and have more to do than just bleed in silence." "You do not have to sleep here," says Temujin, annoyed. "If you do not like my company, I can quite happily ask my father to provide you with your own quarters." Arbessa keeps smiling. The yellow light of the oil lamp makes her face appear even more beautiful than before, and despite his growing fury, he is incapable of turning away from her. Moreover, there is a brief moment in which she seems to realize that she may have gone too far, and is frightened. It was, however, just a very brief moment. Then her beautiful face becomes just as scornful as ever, if not worse. "Then again," she continues, as if he has not said anything, "you look far better without those silly clothes. It must be awfully uncomfortable to walk around with more than your own weight on your body in iron." Temujin instinctively looks down at himself, and Arbessa says quietly, and although he would not have thought it possible, more scornfully, "Just don't you go getting any ideas." "Ideas? I don't know what to think at all," replies Temujin sharply. Well, he means it to sound sharp, but it sounds more pathetic than anything, even to his own ears. He is so red that he does not really need the lamp to light up his yurt. Arbessa stops talking, and although Temujin is not looking at her directly, he can feel that her facial expression has changed. After what seems like an eternity, she speaks again. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Temujin is surprised. "You didn't hurt me," says Temujin, lying without much conviction. "And you need not apologize to anyone," he adds. "Why?" says Arbessa with a furrowed brow. "Because you might be the wife of a Khan one of these days," he says, "and the wife of a Khan never apologizes to anyone for anything." The girl looks at him thoughtfully for a long moment. "And who taught you such rubbish?" she asks, in a soft but confused tone of voice. "My father," answers Temujin loudly, "and it is not rubbish. It is the truth." "Because your father is the Khan, and because the Khan always speaks the truth, even if what he says is not true, you mean?" asks Arbessa. In that instant, Her words make Temujin so angry that he would like to grab her and shake her until she takes them back and says she is sorry. Then he realizes what he has just been thinking and laughs at himself against his own will. "You're probably right," he says. Arbessa is quiet again for a while. She sits up again, pulls her knees to her body and wraps her arms around them, and Temujin finds it more and more difficult not to blatantly stare at her. He manages it somehow, but he is relatively sure that the girl knows what is going on inside him. Not that he understands it himself. "I didn't want to offend you," says Arbessa finally. "You haven't offended me," replies Temujin, and realizes only as he speaks these words that they are the truth. She has not offended him. "But tell me, why are you so hostile?" "Am I so hostile?" asks Arbessa. She leans her chin on her knees and looks up at him, amused. Then she shrugs her shoulders. There is something about the mischievous glint in her eyes that makes Temujin remember something vaguely, but he does not know what. Whatever it is, however, it is familiar and fills him with a feeling of sudden warmth. The feeling is so strong that he has to stop himself from just hugging her. "I'm not used to all of this, you know." "All of what?" asks Temujin. "All these warriors and weapons and fun you have fighting." "I understand," says Temujin. "I've heard tell that your tribe is very peaceful." He does not think that he has said anything wrong, but suddenly Arbessa raises her head and an angry crease appears between her thin eyebrows. "That's right. Just go ahead and say what you think," she snaps. "You think we are a tribe of cowards, don't you? That we don't like fighting." Temujin is about to contradict this, and will probably end up apologizing to her again. But the girl does not let him speak a word. She continues speaking louder than before and more angrily. "You needn't have any qualms about speaking freely. I may still be a child, but I know very well what other tribes think and say about us." "I did not say that I thought your people were cowards," says Temujin in his defense. "But what kind of Khan has a tribe without warriors?" "A very wise Khan, perhaps?" asks Arbessa. Her fury disappears as quickly as it came, yet something has changed. The tender bond between them that appeared a few moments back has been torn. "But how do you expect to defend your land and your property against enemies who may want to rob you of it?" asks Temujin half-heartedly. "No one has tried, as yet," answers Arbessa softly. "Yes, perhaps because there is no honor in winning against an enemy that cannot defend itself," replies Temujin. He regrets having said these words as soon as he has said them. Arbessa is not offended, though. She simply shrugs her shoulders and nods in the direction of the entrance to the tent. "How odd. I thought I just watched my bodyguard win against your man. Simply because my people do not enjoy fighting, we are not defenseless. You should try to listen to her." "To her?" asks Temujin, not understanding what Arbessa means. She does not answer, however, and lies down, pulls up the cover to her shoulders, and turns herself in it so that there is nothing left for Temujin to protect himself from the cold of the night. He sits silently for some time looking at the girl as she pretends to sleep, before he puts out the light. He lies straight and waits for either sleep or the cold, whichever comes first. The cold is the first of the two, and it stops him sleeping. After a while, however, Temujin finds himself once again in the silvery moonlight of his dream world. Usually, not always, but almost always, he has difficulty making out exact forms in his dreams, but tonight he can see more than just vague ghosts under a starry sky. It is still a dark, night-time world, but not quite as impenetrable as usual. Behind Sarantoya he can see hills on a distant horizon, covered by woods, and a silver, winding river. No step, and no traces of people. Temujin can feel that this is a world untouched by the hand of man. He has an almost physical sense of great age and of indescribable power, and this comes not only from the huge dragon, but from the fabric of this world itself, a world which Sarantoya does not often let him see. "Now, did I promise too much?" asks Sarantoya. She is in a cheerful mood, well, as cheerful as a dragon the size of 10 oxen can appear, at least. There is a glint of mischief in her eyes, and her long, scaly tail seems to thump on the floor to the rhythm of some silent music. "Wasn't that an exciting day?" "Well, wasn't it?" "Yes," admits Temujin. Then he pulls a face. "Well, at least it was for some of us here." "Oh, don't be like that about it," answers the dragon in a jovial tone which Temujin just does not understand. "Come on, every man in the village would give his eye-teeth to share his yurt with the daughter of such a mighty Khan." "Yes, but she is a pain in the neck," says Temujin. "Pain in the neck? We have heard those words spoken before about the son of a certain Khan in your village." The dragon lays her head sideways. "So why is she such a pain? Because she says the truth?" Temujin is offended, but does not say anything. He knows there is no use. When Sarantoya has decided to talk about a certain topic, then she talks about it, and that is that. "Yes, but she laughed at me," he says, after some time, "and insulted my father." "No, she didn't," says Sarantoya, shaking her head so that he does not start to contradict her. Her smile disappears, and her face looks worried, quizzical. "Nevertheless, I feel resentment in you, my young friend. What went wrong?" At first, Temujin wants to deny everything, but that would be pointless. Even if Temujin tries to hide things, Sarantoya can read his thoughts, and he knows it. Nevertheless, she always insists on him saying them out loud. "Chuzia," he admits. "Your friend, or, I beg your pardon, your brother in oath now. That makes him more than just a friend, doesn't it?" "Some brother in oath," says Temujin. "He told everyone about it." "About what?" asks the dragon, pretending not to know. "About the thing with the dog," he answers angrily. Now everyone in the village knows that I am afraid of dogs, not just my father, but all of them." "And what is so bad about that? I know that you know this already, but I shall say it again. Even the heart of the bravest warrior is not free of fear. Only the most stupid people have no fear of anything, and these people do not live very long. But that is beside the point. Even we dragons know fear." "Fear of what?" "You would not understand it," answers Sarantoya mysteriously. "And this is not what we are talking about. Now, tell me, what is so bad about everyone knowing you were afraid of something?" "Not just something," answers Temujin, "but dogs. Mangy little mutts. Everyone will laugh at me." Well, to be precise, they are already laughing, he thinks. "No one will laugh at you when you are Khan," says Sarantoya. "And what takes more courage? To face the scorn of your tribesmen because of who you are, or to fight with, what did you call it, a mangy little mutt? You could have beaten it to death if you had wanted. You are strong." "No, I am a coward," says Temujin bitterly. "No, you are not," says Sarantoya almost angrily. "You were afraid of this dog, but you were even more afraid of people finding this out and laughing at you. A real coward kills what he fears, so that no one finds out about his fear." Temujin thinks about the mighty teeth and the wild look in the dog's eyes. He doubts whether the animal really was all that harmless, but does not say anything for the moment. "I still don't understand why he did it, though," he continues. "He's supposed to be my best friend, and he betrayed me. Why?" "Because, unlike you, in the depths of his heart, he really is a coward," answers Sarantoya quietly. "And he is furious." "Furious? At me? But why me? I have never done anything to him." "He missed the dog. For the first time ever, he missed a target, and he blames you. And he is not entirely wrong, if you think about it a moment." "Why? Because my arrow was bent?" says Temujin. "Well, that is certainly what he thinks," says Sarantoya, winking conspiratorially. "But you and I both know why he really missed." Temujin keeps quiet. What Sarantoya says does not make anything better. In any case, it is unimportant why he is to blame for Chuzia's failure. "He is already regretting having told everyone," says Sarantoya, "so don't be angry with him. You are friends, after all, right?" "Well, that's what I thought until now, yes," says Temujin, upset. "Friendship also means forgiving," says Sarantoya. "In fact, that is what it means above all." Temujin is about to make a nasty comment when he notices movement in the corner of his eye and turns round frightened. Something rushes away. It is big, scaly, and snake-like, and disappears so quickly that he cannot make it out. Was it perhaps surprised, He turns back to Sarantoya, who answers his question before he has asked it. "Don't ask, my little friend. I can't answer. And he won't talk to you either. We only talk to the people we belong to." It takes a moment for Temujin to understand what she means. "So, you mean that somebody else here is speaking to a dragon right now?" he murmurs. A moment ago he would never have believed that dragons could grin, but Sarantoya can, and she grins almost shamelessly. Yes, for some time, too. It takes Temujin even longer to understand. Then he turns around, half terrified, to Arbessa. She is not there, of course, because this is just a dream. Sarantoya giggles. "Arbessa?" he murmurs sceptically. "You mean she too has a dragon?" "Well, actually it's us dragons who have you, and not you us," says Sarantoya, a little offended. "But yes, she does." "Oh," says Temujin. "Oh, yes. Oh, indeed," says Sarantoya, making fun of his tone of voice. "So you thought you were the only one?" "If I'm honest, yes, I did. In fact, if he is completely honest, he is not even sure whether Sarantoya actually exists at all." "Well, in that case, I'm going to have to disappoint you," says Sarantoya, teasing him. "You're not as special as all that, my little Khan." "But why did Arbessa not say anything about it?" mumbles Temujin. "Why should she? She doesn't know you at all." Temujin thinks back. In fact, she did say something about it. Anyway, it's nothing special to her. Almost everyone in her tribe has a dragon friend. "The whole tribe?" says Temujin, astonished. "Well, almost all of them," answers Sarantoya, "because they are a very peaceful people, and dragons love peaceful people." "What? Dragons? Of all creatures?" he says. He regrets this immediately, but of course Sarantoya would have heard these words even if he had just thought them. She looks offended, upset, and ever so slightly angry. "You think that just because we are big and strong, we are dangerous?" she asks. Temujin discovers that it is possible to blush in a dream, too. "We are big and very strong," continues Sarantoya, sounding suddenly very serious and still slightly angry. "So no one can be of any danger to us. But why should this make us into beasts? We are not like you people." Temujin wants to say something, but Sarantoya motions him to keep quiet with an astonishingly human movement of her right paw. "I know what people say about us. You all think we are monsters, horrible monsters who eat people and animals and burn land with our breath of fire." She winks at him before continuing. "That's about the size of it, right?" Says Temujin. "But that is not the way it is. We are just as big and strong as you think, even stronger. Just one of us could wipe your tribe off the face of the earth. But why would we do that? No dragon has ever killed a person, and we never shall, as long as you are in existence." "I'm sorry," murmurs Temujin. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," says Sarantoya in her usual softer tones. Suddenly she starts giggling. "Did I just mishear something? Or did you just say sorry to me, son of the Khan?" Temujin is silent, and Sarantoya is serious again. "Well, you would have asked that question at some point, and I've just answered it. Perhaps this was the right moment, now that you have met your wife." "We are not married yet," objects Temujin, but Sarantoya shakes her head, her scales jingling lightly as she does. "She will be your wife, young Khan. You will live a long and happy life together, even though you will betray her one day." "Me? Never!" says Temujin, outraged. Yes, you will," says Sarantoya softly, "but don't worry. She will forgive you." "You can see into the future?" says Temujin, eyes wide open. "Not everything," says Sarantoya. "We dragons do not see into the future, not in the way you think." "Well, you did predict that I was going to meet somebody who would be of great importance to me." "That wasn't the future, my little friend. That was just one day. But we do see a lot, that is true. Some of the paths into the future are clear and wide, some thin and blurred, or even forked. I can tell you that Arbessa will become your wife, and that you will live long and happily together. What you do in that time is up to you. I can't see that. And even if you could see it, you wouldn't tell me," says Temujin. "That's true," answers Sarantoya cheerfully. "But you will find the right way in any case. I'm almost sure." "Almost?" "Almost," insists Sarantoya, "because even we dragons don't know everything. We have neither the right nor the power to get involved in your lives. But you have a good heart, and I believe in you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen you." "Chosen?" repeats Temujin. "We dragons choose the people to whom we wish to offer our friendship, and we choose very carefully. Only those who are pure of heart and do not go the way of the sword will ever know us." Sarantoya hesitates for a moment, as if she is not sure if she should continue talking or not, but she does. "You have never spoken of me to your father. Am I right?" Temujin answers with a shake of his head, and Sarantoya continues. "And perhaps you shouldn't. Did you know that he too once had a dragon companion?" Temujin's eyes open wide. "What? My father? The Khan?" "Before he was Khan," answers Sarantoya, "at about your age." She laughs good-temperedly. "I shouldn't tell you, of course, but he too was afraid." "Of dogs?" "No, of horses," chortled Sarantoya. Of horses? Gasps Temujin. My father, the Khan, was afraid of horses? He was not Khan back then, answers Sarantoya, and he faced and conquered his fear. Temujin needs a while to get used to this idea. And what happened then? He asks. He went the wrong way, answers Sarantoya, in a way that makes it clear to Temujin that it is pointless to ask any further questions. She changes the subject. Back then, many of us had friends in your tribe. There was even a time when all of you had dragons. Why else do you think that so many of your tribe can remember us without ever having seen us? What happened? Asks Temujin. The same thing as almost always, answers Sarantoya sadly. Too many of you chose the wrong path. Temujin can feel the dragon's sorrow, and he realizes that he has hit upon a subject that she does not want to talk about. Nevertheless, he asks another question, quietly. And which path is the wrong path, exactly? Later, answers Sarantoya, clearing her throat loudly. Perhaps I've already told you enough for one day. Just be patient, my little Khan. We will have plenty of opportunities to talk again, perhaps your whole life long. But that is your decision. The Bodyguard. Arbessa has already gone when Temujin wakes up. It is at least an hour after sunrise. He has a horrible taste in his mouth and a throbbing headache. It is as if he hasn't just sat with the men, but also drunk the spirits made of fermented sheep's milk that they sometimes take to excess. Moreover, he still has the strange dream in his head, something to do with the dragon and Arbessa, although he cannot remember any precise details. He's probably breathed in too much smoke from the fire, which would explain both the headache and odd dreams, he thinks. Where is Arbessa, though? Temujin looks at the empty bed next to him and is almost annoyed, until he remembers that he is behaving like an old married man. Sarantoya has said that they will get married, but only at some point, and that is assuming that Temujin understood correctly, and assuming that she has actually spoken to him, and that this is not all just some strange fantasy that he has experienced. That was no fantasy, though. His father used to be afraid of horses? How pathetic is that? Temujin curls his lip in scorn at the very thought of it, and stands up. The noises of village life penetrate into the tent, at once muffled and yet somehow urgent too. He just manages to stop himself shaking his head to dispel his sleepiness. It would probably explode. He feels this bad without even having tasted a drop of the fermented sheep's milk. This is not the first time he asks himself what the warriors see in drinking themselves into unconsciousness night after night. Anyway, his father used to be afraid of horses? Pathetic! Temujin steps out of the tent, crouching as he goes. He feels like a grown warrior with a hangover as the bright morning sun stabs at his eyes, and he does not just blink, but has to grind his teeth to avoid groaning out loud. Normally his father and the warriors behave like this in the morning when the night has been too short and too festive. He understands the attraction of drink less than ever this morning. What he does understand, though, is why the men are often so anxious to get down to the river. He feels dirty. His whole body is sticky, and his clothes and hair smell so badly of smoke that he almost feels ill. He wants nothing more than to get to the river, but before he sets off, he remembers that his father has asked him to make sure he is always dressed properly as long as there are guests in the village. So he gathers up all his armour and weapons into a bundle that he slings over his shoulder. As he makes his way to the hill, he groans under the weight of it. Arbessa was right. It weighs more than he does. Suddenly, he is no longer angry at her for having gone. At least she does not have to see him in this miserable state. He drags his feet up the hill without replying to any of the tribespeople who greet him. Then he crosses the patch of woods where he and Chuzia gave their oath, yawning and even stopping a couple of times to regain his strength. As he passes the bush into which the dog disappeared, an unpleasant memory tries to break into his mind, but he ignores it and forces himself to think of nothing, which is not hard in his current state. After what seems like an eternity, he can see the river shimmering through the undergrowth in front of him. He sets off faster towards the water and then throws his bundle of clothing and armour to the ground so that it rattles and jingles for a few moments. He reaches for his underwear and is about to pull it off over his head when he sees something out of the corner of his eye and stops. Something, or someone, is splashing in the water. Temujin looks closely and notices that he is blushing again. Someone is swimming in the shallow waters of the Omon. That someone is Arbessa. She is wearing less than the night before. Well, nothing. And the water is so clear that it hides nothing. If she finds it as embarrassing as Temujin, she hides it masterfully, as she kicks around in the water lying on her back and looking up at him with her glinting eyes. She does not even have the decency to pretend to be embarrassed, and is having a lot of fun at Temujin's expense. "My, oh my, our great warrior is already awake," she says teasingly, picking up last night's conversation as if there has been no interruption. "Astonishing. Don't you need more time to recover from the great battle?" "Good morning to you, too," growls Temujin. Last night, when Sarantoya told him about his future with Arbessa, he still liked the idea despite their misunderstanding, but perhaps one should not believe everything dragons say, especially female dragons. He is close to taking off his clothes and jumping into the water, but then he reconsiders and wades into the icy water, his teeth chattering as he goes. Arbessa moves a little aside, but doesn't let him out of her vision for an instant. She looks even more scornfully in his direction. But what else can he expect? "Does your tribe always wash with its clothes on?" she asks. Temujin looks at her angrily, dives under, and stays below the waterline until his lungs are crying out for air and his heart is about to burst. He resurfaces, spluttering and gasping for air, runs his hands through his long wet hair, and then answers, "Only if the water is dirty or full of vermin." Arbessa looks at him confused, shrugs her shoulders, and then paddles away on her back, using only her hands and feet. Then, however, she turns back in order to circle around him, getting closer and closer, like a predator around its prey. He dives again, swims underwater back to the bank, and wades back out of the water, soaking wet. If Arbessa were not there, he would have taken his underwear off now and wrung it out, but she keeps looking at him. So he runs his hands over his undergarments and bends down to pick up his bundle. He threw it carelessly, so he spends quite some time untangling it before he can put his clothes on. His wet underwear makes every movement more difficult, however, and sticks to his body as he goes. He is annoyed when he thinks about how long it will take to dry under all this leather, and his skin already feels cold enough as it is. Arbessa must be thinking the same. Even without turning to her, he can feel her scornful gaze. Sarantoya might have predicted he would betray her, but perhaps the dragon was wrong. He feels more like drowning her than anything else. Without saying a word, he finishes dressing himself. Not because he really wants to, or because his father has asked him to, but more than anything because of what Arbessa said to him last night. He even puts on his belt and weapons, as well as his shield and helmet. Only then does he turn to the water and see that Arbessa really has been watching him the whole time. Her eyes are still as wide and defiant as ever. Suddenly he remembers what they remind him of Sarantoya. Arbessa has Sarantoya's eyes. It is almost as if he does not want to, but he asks her a question. What is she called? He. She keeps smiling, and something comes into her eyes that touches and warms him for a brief instant. I'm a girl, and our dragons are always male, just like yours are always female. Now I understand what the warriors mean when they talk about their wives, he replies, grinning. Arbessa smiles back, but her eyes keep their strange new expression. Tselmeg. His name is Tselmeg. She paddles around in the water a little more, as if she is waiting for an answer, and when she does not get one, she turns her back to him. Temujin clears his throat awkwardly, starts to turn around, and stops still. His good mood disappears again instantly, and his face darkens. He is no longer alone. Just a little behind him, 4 or 5 boys climb out of the bush into which the dog had disappeared the day before yesterday. One of them is Chuzir, another is Ilan, and the other 3 are Ilan's most trusted friends, and the worst bullies in the tribe. At first, they just stand there, staring at him. All except Chuzir are smiling threateningly, and Temujin's heart starts to beat faster. "Uh-oh," sneers Arbessa. Now our big, strong warrior has a bit of a problem. But it won't be too bad. I mean, he is armed, at least. Although she is only saying this to rib him, and he knows it, Temujin does not feel like laughing right now. The sight of the 5 boys scares him. They too are armed. Chuzir with his bow and arrow, the 4 others with clubs that they have clearly just cut from the trees. What use is his sword now? He is not going to run at them with a bare blade. If fighting is at all necessary. Temujin thinks for a moment, and although his heart is still beating fast, he realizes that he does not yet know what they want. Perhaps they are just here by chance, and he remembers what his father has often told him. If you show fear, your enemy will see it too. Don't show fear, and they will avoid a fight. And who is saying anything about fighting anyway? Whispers someone to him from behind his forehead. As he steps towards the boys, he realizes it is Sarantoya's voice, and stops again. The dragon is there, invisible to all except him. It is strange that she is there. This is the first time he has heard her voice whilst awake. Something very important must have happened. Without even being aware of it, he looks left and right. The dragon is nowhere to be seen, of course, but Ilan and his friends notice the move, and a wide, sneering grin spreads across Ilan's face. "Don't you worry, oh mighty Khan," he scoffs. "There aren't any dogs around." Temujin sucks air through his teeth, and then walks on, holding his shoulders as straight as he can. His right hand is on the hilt of his sword, as if it had just landed there, but this does not have the effect he expects, and Ilan's grin just gets broader. "Well, look at that. Our future Khan has put on his sword and shield in order to defend the honour of his bride. Then again," he continues, looking lewdly in the direction of the river, "it does not seem like there is much to defend in this case." For an instant, Temujin sees red. For a short moment, he must stop himself actually pulling his sword and cutting Ilan's stupid smile out of his face. Then, however, he calms himself down. He and Arbessa have done nothing dishonourable, and nakedness is not a taboo in the tribe. Men, women, and children often wash in the river together, and they never wear clothes like he just has. Ilan is just trying to get him angry. "What do you want?" he asks in a strong voice. He is careful not to look at Chuzir as he says this, but his brother in oath licks his lips nervously and looks away quickly nonetheless. Temujin thinks back to what Sarantoya told him last night and sees that it was the truth. Chuzir is already regretting his mistake. But why is he here with the others then? Temujin is confused. Sarantoya answers him silently. Because he cannot go back. One mistake all too often leads directly to another, if the person making it does not have the courage to face it. "Oh, we just wanted to make sure that our future Khan and his bride are not in any danger, answers Ilan. Woof, woof, adds one of the other boys. Temujin ignores this and replies coldly, Well, everything is fine, thanks. It is good to see, however, that you already know the debt you owe your future ruler. Juzir takes a small, nervous step backwards. Ilan's hand grasps his club tighter. His eyes flash with fury. Don't be too sure about that, Temujin, he growls. You are not yet Khan. And if I were, that shouldn't stop you, answers Temujin defiantly. Just imagine that I am some boy, any boy, from the village. I'm having trouble doing that, answers Ilan icily, because all the other boys in the village have the heart of a true warrior. He is only trying to provoke you, whispers Sarantoya, and there is no shame in avoiding a fight that you cannot win. His father has already told him this more than once, and it always sounded obvious and convincing. Oddly enough, however, it does not sound so obvious or convincing now. In fact, Temujin feels pure rage welling up inside him, but fear at the same time. There are 4 of them, not counting Juzir, and Ilan on his own is stronger than him, so he says nothing. Suddenly the bigger boy smiles a broad and unmistakably dirty smile. We do beg your pardon, O most noble Khan, he says in a smutty tone. If you want to be alone with your bride, we'll happily turn round, unless you need help. The other boys, except Juzir, greet this comment with dirty laughter. Take that back, hisses Temujin. What if I don't? Asks Ilan. Temujin looks down at the club in Ilan's hand. Ilan shrugs his shoulders and sends it flying into the bushes. Just so you can't say we were unfair about it. You are welcome to use your sword, however, Great Khan. At least then we would be about even. I don't want to fight you, says Temujin, who is almost surprised as he hears his own words. We have one blood. Why should we strike one another? Ilan pulls a mock disappointed face. Why? Perhaps because I do not want to serve a Khan who is a coward, he suggests. Temujin does not reply to this, but suddenly feels a tension in his thoughts that does not come from him. Sarantoya is looking at him and clearly expects a certain reaction, but he does not know which. Besides, he is terribly afraid. He has understood that there is no way he can avoid this fight. Ilan and the others have come to fight him here and now, and have chosen this moment so that our Besser will see, for whatever reason. Instead of answering, he takes off his shield, slowly lays it down on the floor, and then removes his sword and belt. Ilan stops his pretend surprise, shrugs his shoulders, and then nods at his friends. Well, what do you know? Our little Khan shows courage. Now, show us what you've got. This is the cue for one of the boys to go into the bushes and come back with a string on which a dog has been leashed. On closer inspection, however, it appears to be something that thinks it is a dog, because it is smaller than most cats, has a mangy coat, and is slobbering so badly that it has left a wet trail behind it. One of its ears has been torn off. It growls quietly when it sees Temujin. "Now, don't be afraid, O great Khan," smirks Ilan, his three stooges laughing spitefully. "And if this terrifying beast gets too dangerous, just say the word, and we'll do what we can." On this, the boy lets the dog loose, and it runs straight at Temujin, barking furiously as it goes. It is a pathetic creature, and not even Temujin can be afraid of it. Nevertheless, he takes a step back, perhaps out of reflex, and Ilan laughs loudly. Meanwhile, invisible and silent, Sarantoya stretches her wings, and just as it is about to reach Temujin, the dog jumps back in fear, runs around looking scared, and then runs back with its tail between its legs, squeaking as it goes. Ilan looks surprised, truly, but then his face darkens. "Fine," he growls, "but let's see if you can scare off something that isn't 10 times smaller than you." He lunges at Temujin with his fists curled. It is more a reflex than anything else that helps Temujin to fend off his first punch, but the sheer force of Ilan's wild attack throws Temujin to the ground, and Ilan rams his knee so hard against his chest that it is probably only his armour that saves his ribs from being broken. The air whistles out of his lungs. His heart explodes in fear, and he would scream if he had enough air. Ilan bellows triumphantly, punches him a few times in the face, and knocks his arms back without any effort at all as he tries to hit back. The next punch splits his bottom lip. Then his nose starts to bleed. The punch after that almost sends him into unconsciousness. "Sarantoya, help me!" In his mind, he is screaming for help. Nothing happens. The dragon's wings do not come to save him this time, nor does fire rain down from the heavens. Ilan just keeps hitting him, perhaps with even more strength than before. Temujin is afraid. As the punches get stronger, he starts to worry that he may die. He blindly feels around for anything hard and heavy that he can use to defend himself, and finds the hilt of his sword. It sits neatly in the palm of his hand. It is heavy and sharp, and gives him a feeling of safety. Even as Ilan sits astride him, raining down blows, he knows he can stop it all with just one movement. Then the blood flowing to the floor will not be his any more. Instead of using the sword, however, he drops it again and calls desperately in his thoughts for Sarantoya. "Help me!" The dragon remains silent. Temujin can feel her presence so clearly, as if she were right behind him, but she says nothing. "Stop!" shouts a furious, high-pitched voice. Ilan punches him in the face again, even harder, but then his weight disappears from Temujin's chest, and Ilan's mad laughter is replaced by surprised shouts. Temujin pushes himself up onto his elbows, screws up his eyes to get rid of the blood and tears, and then opens them wide as he sees who has come to help him. He has been counting on Chuzir, desperately hoping for him, but his brother in oath is standing looking lost and confused. Now it is Ilan who is lying on his back, covering his face with his hands. The form who is kneeling on him, smacking him in the face again and again, is about a head shorter than Temujin, has hip-length, raven-black hair clinging to its skin in wet streaks, and is wearing nothing except this hair and water. "Leave him alone!" screams Arbessa, and every word is accompanied by another slap. Ilan's face is starting to turn red with all the smacking, despite Arbessa's hands being small and slim. "You call that courage? 4 on 1? You really are very brave warriors, aren't you?" Ilan finally overcomes his surprise and throws Arbessa off him with a rough movement. His face is glowing red and is contorted with shame and fury. Murderous rage is burning in his eyes. Temujin is almost completely sure that he will lunge at him again, but instead Ilan takes a step back and spits blood and phlegm on the grass. "Yes," he says contemptuously, "I should apologize to my Khan. I did not know that his bodyguards were so brave." With this, he turns on his heels and marches off, followed by his 3 stooges. Chuzir stands still, not sure what to do, but does not look Temujin in the eyes. After a moment he too goes, almost as fast as the others. Temujin tries to get up, but everything is spinning. His face hurts badly. Every breath he takes causes him pain. It feels like Ilan may well have broken one of his ribs. He feels Arbessa kneel down beside him, stretch out her hand to him, but she does not dare to touch him. Then she does something which surprises him completely. She bends down to his face and blows a kiss on his cheek. "You were very brave, Temujin," she whispers in his ear. Temujin looks at her, confused. He does not understand what she means. Brave? He has been a coward. "What?" he murmurs. "It was brave of you not to do it." Arbessa nods towards the sword. She smiles warmly and honestly, in a way she has not smiled at him yet. Then she stands up and in one flowing movement puts out her hand to help him to his feet. He is embarrassed, but he needs the help to get up. He starts to thank her and is about to make a jokey remark to try and play down his weakness when he notices movement behind him and jumps round, convinced that Ilan and the others have come back to give him another drubbing. Instead, he sees his father. Taimur stands before him, silent and stony-faced, between the trees. Temujin understands that he has been there for some time, has seen everything. His father's stare cuts like a knife. It is a look of contempt. The Wisdom of the Dragons. "Why didn't you help me?" says Temujin to Sarantoya as soon as he has closed his eyes and slid over into his dream world. "I thought you were my friend." "I am," says the dragon, fluttering her eyelids, "and you should count yourself lucky too, if I may say so." "How so?" asks Temujin, annoyed. "Because you don't want me as your enemy, little Khan. No one does." For just a moment there is something in her eyes that he has never seen before, that he has never felt in her before, and that makes him go ice-cold to the depth of his soul. This feeling disappears too quickly for him to become frightened, however, and Sarantoya resumes her usual wide dragon smile. "And besides," she adds in a changed, almost cheerful tone, "I did help you." "Ha!" snorts Temujin. "Did I not repel that bloodthirsty beast that wanted to tear you to pieces?" "Do you mean that yapping little piece of scum?" replies Temujin with a dismissive tone. "That was great of you, but I think I would have just about been able to handle it, thanks." "Are you sure?" asks Sarantoya, mock cluelessly. "You know exactly what I mean," snarls Temujin, "although I didn't even want you to tear off their heads or anything like that." "What did you want, then?" "Perhaps if you had just frightened them off a bit, you know, filled their hearts with fear or something of that nature." "They are already so afraid that there is no more room for fear," answers the dragon. "But I know what you mean. It would have been just lovely if they had run off scared and then thought that they were scared of you. Would you have liked that?" "Yes," answers Temujin. "So you like people to be afraid of you?" asks the dragon. Temujin is about to nod automatically, but then he is not sure whether he really does want people to be afraid of him. "I think you fought very bravely. Well, for a man. Not by dragon standards, of course." "What? I just got punched the whole time," growls Temujin resentfully. "Well, if I remember correctly, Ilan got the odd smack too, and, believe you me, they hurt him far more than the punches he gave you hurt you," says the dragon, giggling, "because that kind of lad really dislikes getting beaten up by a girl." "Not as much as I dislike being saved by one, though," thinks Temujin. Instinctively, he turns to the left, where Arbessa is sleeping next to him. He cannot actually see her in his dream world, but he can still feel her presence. He feels warmth and comfort like he has not felt since lying in his mother's arms as a small boy, but this is different. It is more intimate and much, much sweeter. Sarantoya does not try to even pretend that she is not reading his thoughts. "You are ashamed of being helped by a girl, but you accuse me of not having helped too." "Yes, but you're a dragon, not a girl," hisses Temujin. "But I was one once," answers Sarantoya snappishly. "And that wasn't all that long ago, either. Those millennia just fly by," she giggles again, then sighs deeply, and is suddenly very serious again. "You did not need any help, little Khan. You did everything right." "Right? You mean I got a right beating?" You could have killed him, but you didn't. Temujin thinks of the sword he held in his hand, thinks of the short but intense temptation, the power it exercised for a brief moment sends a shiver down his spine. Perhaps this is the first time he has realized just how thin the boundary is between life and death. It was right, repeats Sarantoya heavily, because a few scratches and cuts will heal, but you cannot give back a life you have taken. And sometimes the person who has taken it becomes the person who is pursued. Is this supposed to be the wisdom of the dragons or something? He asks angrily. No, answers Sarantoya. Just my experience after a long life. Nothing would have happened if you had killed that boy, because you are the son of the Khan, and he challenged you. But you may have never forgotten him. Ever. And what if I had forgotten him? That would only have been worse, says Sarantoya mysteriously, because sometimes it is only a tiny step that puts a life onto the wrong path. But you did right. Temujin is not in the mood for another round of dragon wisdom. Not that Sarantoya is not in the right. He knows she is. Yes, well, whatever the case, I learned something important today. What did you learn? That it might be nice to have friends, but that's all there is. When it comes down to it, you're on your own. Sarantoya looks at him silently for a while, and in such a strange way that Temujin feels more and more uncomfortable. He only said what he just said to annoy her slightly, but he realizes he has really hurt her. He did not mean to do that. I meant Chuzir, he claims. No, says Sarantoya. No, you didn't. Temujin is silent. I understand, says Sarantoya, sighing. What? Instead of answering his question, Sarantoya just stares straight past him, as if the answer is somewhere out there in the grey twilight surrounding them. There is something you should know, little Khan, she says after a long while. I did not finish my story last night. I know that you beseeched me to help, but I chose not to hear you. Why? I have not yet told you why so few of us chose to befriend your tribespeople and make you into companions. Companions? It sounds like we're married. He tries to laugh, but his joke does not have any effect on Sarantoya, who stares at him with a serious look. Well, we do marry you, in a way, she answers, because we enter into an eternal bond with you. If we choose to bind ourselves to one of you, then we stay with you for life, unless, that is, you take the wrong path. Even then, we have to grant you a last wish, whatever it may be. Whatever it may be, says Temujin, making sure. You mean I can wish for whatever I want, and I'll get it? Whatever it may be? Whatever it may be, repeats the dragon. She sounds sad. Be careful what you wish for, though. You would never see me again. and you might have to pay a terrible price." What she says scares Temujin, and he is quite sure that she means to do so too. Suddenly, however, Sarantoya bares her teeth in a wide dragon smile. "Well, enough wisdom of the dragons for one night?" she asks cheerfully. Temujin is serious, however. He is still scared, and Sarantoya's fake joviality just makes it worse. He can tell that she is hiding something behind it, and he can sense that he does not want to know it. "You haven't told me why you only reveal yourselves to so few people," he says. "We have been responsible for too much bad in the world," answers the dragon, "because you humans are clever. You're all incredibly stupid, but very clever too. After a while, too many people knew about the last wish, and we had to grant them. The temptation of unlimited power is great, and only very few can withstand it. Your world and your tribe have experienced boundless suffering, wars and terrors and death, and we dragons are not there to offer these kinds of presents. So most of us have chosen to avoid people, and only very few of us seek human companions." "But you did," says Temujin. "Why?" "Because I saw that you have real greatness inside you, Temujin," she replies. "Do not disappoint me, little Khan. The consequences for your people would be grave." Friendship. Bman and his entourage stay for 10 days. As befits his rank and position as a great Khan and brother in oath to Temujin's father, a feast is given every evening in Bman's honour. The fire in his father's tent often burns so long that its last light mingles with the first rays of the rising sun. Arbessa and Temujin spend every night in his yurt, and although she then passes most of the day avoiding him, either busy doing something or chatting with the other women, they become a lot closer to each other in this time. They haven't touched each other at all. The fleeting kiss as he lay on the ground that first morning remains their only kiss. She even seems afraid of any other contact, although she does not seem to be prudish. Something happens between them, however. Temujin is not sure whether it is friendship or love, but he feels good when she is there. After a while, he misses the continual nagging and frequently unfriendly scorn when she is not there. At first, what Bman said about him spending a year in his village frightened him. Temujin has never been away from his home for more than a couple of days at a time, but now he is more afraid of not seeing Arbessa for more than a day. Not only does he now know that he will have to spend the rest of the summer and the winter to come in the Voshon village, but he is actually looking forward to being there together with Arbessa. And so it comes to the last day. Arbessa is already gone when he wakes up. Temujin has not yet found out how she always manages to get up before him, even when he tries to get up earlier. So Temujin leaves the yurt and runs to the river to wash without his armour, hoping to find her there. Instead, he finds Chuzir there. His brother in oath is sitting on a rock on the riverbank, his bare feet dangling in the water. Temujin does not need to ask him to know that he has been waiting for him for some time. He wants to say something, but it is like his throat has been sewn shut again. Chuzir has avoided him over the last few days with the same success as Arbessa. Finally, however, Chuzir says something to break the uncomfortable silence. "Hello," he says, without turning round or even looking up. "Hello," replies Temujin, just as curtly. He has not admitted it to himself, but he has greatly desired to see his brother in oath one more time before leaving the village. Now that he sees him, though, he does not know what to say. He wants to slap himself until the words he has so carefully considered over the last days come out, but they don't. "Today is the big day," says Chuzir after the silence threatens to become too heavy. He is still looking away from Temujin with his feet in the water, and has something lying on his thighs that Temujin cannot see. Temujin wants to step closer, but for some reason feels he cannot. "Yes," he answers. "They are already saddling up the horses," continues Chuzir. To be exact, they had already started saddling them yesterday evening, and both of them know it. "We are starting off early. It is a long ride." "Yes, long indeed. You won't be back until next spring, if at all." "What do you mean?" asks Temujin. "I will come back, of course I will come back." "And what if the girl does not want to?" asks Chuzir. "The girl," he replies, a little strongly in tone, "is my betrothed. I shall return with her before the year is out." "Unless she does not want to leave her people, and persuades you to stay," says Chuzir. "Women are good at that sort of thing." "Nonsense," replies Temujin. "My father would never allow it." Chuzir stares at the river for a while. The starlight is dancing on it. "Yes," he sighs, "you are right. He would never let that happen." His voice is full of bitterness, and at first Temujin does not understand it. Then he sucks air through his teeth. "I do not believe it. You are jealous of Arbessa." "Rubbish," replies Chuzir flatly. "It's just that—" He needs a moment to find the right words and keeps looking at the river. "It's just that I don't want to lose you. We are friends." Temujin is as relieved as he is confused by this statement. In fact, he is so confused that he is slightly angry. "I shall return before the year is out," he replies sharply. "And we are more than friends. We are brothers in oath." "Well, I hope we still are," he adds in his thoughts. On this, Chuzir turns round to face him and says something that scares Temujin. "Are we still brothers in oath?" "What do you mean?" responds Temujin roughly. Chuzir takes his feet out of the water and turns slowly towards him until Temujin can see what he has in his lap. His eyes widen. "I've been waiting for you because I wanted to speak to you alone and to give you this, if you want it back." He holds up the arrow to Temujin. "Have you lost your mind?" gasps Temujin. "We swore our oath on this arrow." I am not worthy of it," replies Chuzia quietly. "I betrayed you, and did not stand by you when you needed my help. I would understand if you want to undo our oath." For a moment, Temujin wants to grab the arrow out of his hands, not to break it, and so to undo this oath made for all eternity, but to slap Chuzia in the face for being so stupid. "You have gone mad," he says. "I will go mad with anger if you do not put away this arrow right now. How did you betray me?" "I should not have told the others about your fear of dogs." "That is true," says Temujin. "So you owe me one then." He grins. Chuzia looks up at him uncertainly. His hand, in which the arrow is resting, is trembling ever so slightly, but a faint glimmer of hope comes into his eyes. It is still quite dark, so Temujin cannot be sure, but he thinks he sees tears glinting in the starlight. "And there was no point trying to help against Ilan," he says, grinning even wider, "because I had a great bodyguard, and if you say any more stupid things about our friendship being over, I'll set her on you." "So you forgive me then?" asks Chuzia shyly. "There is nothing to forgive," says Temujin fiercely. Then he takes the arrow out of Chuzia's hand and lays it carefully on the ground. Chuzia looks closely at Temujin, as if he is looking for traces of malice or a grudge in his face. "And what about Ilan and the others?" he asks. "You keep an eye on them for me until I return," replies Temujin, mock strict and winking conspiratorially. "Can you keep a secret?" he asks Chuzia, who nods. "When I come back with Arbessa, we won't be alone." "What do you mean?" asks Chuzia, wide-eyed. "I've already spoken with Arbessa's father, and he is going to help me," continues Temujin. Chuzia's eyes get even wider and his jaw drops. "There are lots of puppies in his village, and he has promised to give me one that I can raise," says Temujin. "When I come back, I will have the biggest, wildest dog you can imagine." Chuzia looks at him in surprise for a moment longer. Then he starts to laugh loudly. Finally they hug and return hand in hand to the village. The others are already waiting for them. A few moments later, Temujin leaves the village. Bajar and Batu. Almost 9 months later to the day, Temujin returns, just as he has promised his brother in oath he will. This time there is no huge baggage train approaching the dozen yurts of his home village, nestling next to the hill on the banks of the Oman. It is just he, Arbessa, and their 2 loyal bodyguards. Despite his tribe's peaceful nature, and the fact that there are no animosities with any of the neighbouring tribes, Arbessa's father insists on these 2 accompanying the couple. 2 further bodyguards are present too, Bajar and Batu, the 2 huge black dogs that Temujin has raised in the preceding months, and which follow him everywhere he goes. Their arrival does not go unnoticed. Temujin's sharp eyes and ears tell him that they are being followed by lookouts, but they have not come with bad intentions. They are just watching them, not planning to ambush them. When they are about 2 arrow flights away from the village, a small troop of riders approaches them. Temujin sees from a long way off that his father is not one of them. He is a little disappointed, but not too badly, and the feeling goes as quickly as it has come. After all, they saw each other but 10 days ago. As is custom in the 2 tribes, his father visited the father of the bride at the end of the engagement period to discuss the final details of the wedding. Then he returned earlier in order to prepare the great feast in Temujin's village. Bman and the great men of his tribe are to arrive later, at which time Temujin and Arbessa will marry, and the bond between the 2 tribes will become official. Temujin is looking forward to this day. In the months past they have not been apart for a single day, and he now knows Arbessa as well as anyone can know another person. Yet it will be different once they are married, the only son and the only daughter of 2 Khans. Temujin has learned a lot from Arbessa and her people, and perhaps Arbessa has learnt the odd thing from him. Although they have never said it, they both know how their future together will be. After many years, hopefully very many years, Bman and Tamar will be called to the gods, and then they will unite their 2 tribes, and make a new and more powerful one which is not ruled by a man of the sword, but by a man of wisdom. It will be a tribe of prosperous farmers and artisans, not of warriors and pillagers. But this is a long way in the future. Arbessa steers her pony closer to Temujin's horse and points to the riders approaching. "Your father is not coming to welcome us?" "He is the Khan, and a very busy man," answers Temujin with a touch of mockery, "and we are only children." "Yes, and your mother will probably tear his head off if he doesn't bring you home as quickly as possible. I certainly would if I had not seen my only son for so long." "Yes, well," sighs Temujin, "my mother is an obedient woman and knows to respect her husband." "Then maybe you should marry her," says Arbessa with a straight face. Temujin is about to reply with a jokey answer, but now he sees the riders come closer and recognizes Chuzir. He shouts out his name and dashes off towards him. The 2 dogs follow him, barking excitedly. Arbessa falls back, although Temujin knows that she could ride just as fast if she wanted. The 3 riders also increase their speed, and Chuzir waves at Temujin, who sees that his brother in oath has his bow on the saddle and the arrow in his quiver, just their arrow. His 2 companions hold their horses back as they draw nearer, so that only Temujin and Chuzir are approaching one another, like 2 knights duelling. Indeed, it seems that neither wants to be the one to stop, and it is only at the last minute that both of them tear their horses out of the gallop and pass by each other closely enough for Temujin's left knee to touch Chuzir's. He yanks so hard at the bridle that the horse neighs angrily and stands on its hind legs, turning round instantly. Chuzir does exactly the same. They approach each other like 2 warriors, but embrace as friends, bending in their saddles. Temujin almost falls from his, due to the force of Chuzir's embrace. His 2 dogs run around yapping and growling, but seem to have understood that this was not meant to be a fight, and wag their tails. For a while, the two friends just laugh happily, pat each other on the shoulder, or prod and poke one another until Temujin notices that their friendly exchange of blows threatens to become less friendly, and stops. "And so this is how you greet your future Khan?" he asks, laughing. "No, this is how I greet an old friend who can still ride a horse as well as ever." "I let you off lightly," replies Temujin. "It wouldn't have been fair to put you to shame after we haven't seen each other for so long." Chuzia's horse starts to get restless, and he has to calm it back down. Temujin uses the time to have a good look at his old friend. He has not been away for a full year, and yet his friend seems to have grown up a lot. His shoulders have got broader, he is quite a bit taller, and he is also far more muscular. Then he sees that he too must look different to Chuzia. Even he himself has noticed changes in recent months. He too has grown a lot more than Chuzia, and his shoulders too are broader. He is far better built than he was, and his voice has become a lot deeper. That is almost certainly due to the way he has been living. Bman's tribe is not just peaceful, but very wealthy. They eat well every day, their yurts are never cold, and he has learnt to eat other things than lamb and mutton that he would never have tried before, even if he was reluctant at first. And once he got used to them, these new foodstuffs not only tasted good, but did him good too. That is only one reason behind the change, though. Another being Arbessa, in whose presence he really comes into his own. The third, and perhaps most important thing, is something that he cannot put his finger on, something that cannot be described. It is the peaceful life of the Voshon, a life free of fear and fighting and war and blood. It soothes his soul and affects his body in a good way. "In just a few days you will be a married man," a silent voice says, teasing him. "But don't overdo it. Enjoy the time that you are still a boy. Later you will wish you still were." He is about to turn in his saddle and give Arbessa a look. He is used to her little speeches, but he has asked her to leave off a little for the first few months. It has taken him some time to realize that her apparently rude way of talking to him is her manner of showing her affection, and he knows that his friends and people in the tribe will not understand this straight away. He suddenly realizes that the voice is Sarantoya's, though. Recently, the dragon has started talking to him more often during daylight hours as well as in his dreams, and her voice seems to be getting more and more similar to Arbessa's. Well, it is becoming as sarcastic in any case. Behind him he hears a high-pitched and mildly scornful laugh, and as Chuzia gets his horse back under control and looks up, he is looking directly at Arbessa's face. Unlike for her first visit, Arbessa has not worn a veil, and Temujin is visibly amused by the effect Arbessa's face has on Chuzia. He is looking at somebody he has last seen as a girl, and who is now a woman. "Don't believe a word this silly boy says," jokes Arbessa. "My father found the most peaceful horse in the whole tribe. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have made it here." So Arbessa is clearly not going to play the obedient wife, not even on her first day. Temujin sighs silently to himself and hears a silent laugh behind his forehead. Chuzia laughs, and for a moment Temujin has the impression that a shadow has come over his face. It disappears again very quickly, and he is not sure it really was there. "Arbessa," replies Chuzia, "I am pleased to see you again." Arbessa replies pleasantly, and then she and Chuzia exchange polite greetings. Arbessa starts to tease him too, just like she does Temujin, who uses this time to size up the rest of the group. He is overjoyed to see his arrow in Chuzia's quiver. Perhaps Chuzia took it with him deliberately, and Temujin is angry at himself for not having thought of taking his oath arrow too. Yet Chuzia is bound to understand this. In any case, if the look in his eyes is anything to go by, he is too happy to see Temujin to think about little details like that. He tears his gaze away from Chuzia and looks at the other two riders, who have stayed back at a respectful distance. He is surprised to see that one of them is Ilan, and is not sure whether this is a good or a bad thing. In contrast to Chuzia, he does not seem to have changed at all, and still looks how Temujin remembers him, a thin, tall fellow with a mean face and malicious eyes. The only difference, however, is that he is looking at Temujin with respect. No trace of friendliness at all, but respect nonetheless. The other rider with him was also at the riverbank that day, and he is not looking at Temujin at all, but is staring wide-eyed at his two huge dogs. They are weaving in and out of the horses' legs, wagging their tails when they look up at Temujin, Arbessa, and Chuzia, and growling and baring their tremendous teeth when they look at Ilan and the other boy. Temujin briefly grins, but does not think any further about what he might do. He will have plenty of time to pay them back for what they did. For the moment, there are more important things to do. "And do you really need to pay them back?" adds Sarantoya silently. "No, not really." Temujin decides that Chuzia has spent enough time suffering his future wife's cheerful teasing, for now at least, and pushes his horse in between their steeds, pretending to be strict with his friend. "If I did not know better," he growls, "I should think you were courting my future wife. But you would never do a thing like that, would you?" "Never," says Chuzia, making an injured face, and adding with a loud whisper, "Well, not when you were around." Arbessa and Sarantoya too find this funny and laugh. Chuzia too starts to laugh out loud, and Temujin pretends to be even stricter and turns to the two riders. "Accompany my bride to the village. I have some business to take care of with this utter rogue here." He follows this little joke with a fully overdone commanding gesture. Chuzia grins at him, but the other two immediately start off on their horses and try to flank Arbessa's pony. Ilan makes an almost ridiculously low bow. "As you wish, my Khan." Temujin knits his brow. They must have said that to make fun of him. Yet they are frightfully respectful about it. In fact, they seem almost afraid of him. The second boy still will not look at him. Something is not right here. He remains silent, however, until Arbessa and her bodyguards, all four of them, have started for the village and are a good distance away. Then he turns in his saddle to Chusia and, with a puzzled expression, asks him something. "What did you do to make them so friendly to me all of a sudden?" Chusia does not answer. The elation of the morning melts away with the first rays of the sun. Temujin repeats the question, now very seriously. "What is going on here, Chusia? Why is he calling me Khan?" Chusia avoids his gaze, lets 3, maybe 4 heartbeats go by that seem like an eternity, and then speaks. "Because you are Khan, Temujin." "What do you mean?" Temujin's voice sounds more frightened than he actually is. He does not really understand what Chusia's answer means, or maybe he does not want to understand it. His thoughts are suddenly more tense than ever, and the tension is not coming from him. Something else is inside him, listening, terrified and scared of what is to come. "Where is my father?" asks Temujin, once he realizes that Chusia will not answer of his own accord. His brother in oath is still avoiding his gaze. "He is not here," Chusia says then. "Not here?" Temujin sits up in his saddle, straight as an arrow. "What do you mean? He rode out before us just 10 days ago." "I know," interrupts Chusia, turning slowly in his saddle to face his brother in oath. Temujin can see how difficult this is for him. "He did not arrive, Temujin. I'm sorry." "Not arrived? What's that supposed to mean? Do not talk to me in riddles, Chusia. What happened?" "The Tartars," answers Chusia. An icy hand takes hold of Temujin's heart and seems to crush it, slowly but mercilessly. He tries to say something but cannot speak a word. He is horrified. "The Tartars?" he whispers back after a while. "But why? I mean, how?" Chusia holds his gaze, but it costs him strength. His voice trembles as he talks. "We don't know exactly how. He has been taken prisoner. That is all they have told us." "But he is alive?" asks Temujin. Chusia hesitates too long for his answer to sound as convincing as Temujin would like. "Probably," he says after some time. He tries a laugh. "You know what cowards they are. They are hoping that we will pay a great ransom, and as long as they think that we will give them gold and livestock, they will not touch him." Temujin stares at him. A feeling of strange, crippling pain starts to spread inside him. His father? Prisoner? That is impossible. And it is not right either. Suddenly, it is as if he is waking up from a dream that has been long and sweet, a dream in which the world was peaceful. It is too beautiful to be true, and his awakening is all the more painful. "Why did you not tell me? You should have sent a messenger." "We only heard yesterday," answers Chusia, not defensively but quietly and sympathetic. The elders came together and sent a messenger to the Tatars to ask about their conditions. He has not yet returned, but this is no reason to worry, he adds hastily, almost frightened. It is a long way to travel. He will be here at sundown at the very earliest. Temujin closes his eyes. The feeling of having left a beautiful dream for an equally horrible nightmare is still there. He is filled with cold horror, and with something else that he recoils from, something that he does not want to recognize. Something is stirring in his thoughts, something big and powerful, whispering to him in an inaudible and comforting voice. Yet he does not want to hear the words that are being spoken. He tries to think of his father, but this makes him shiver. They spoke to each other just a few days ago, yet the picture in his mind is of Tamer's face as it appeared to him that morning on the riverbank. His face as he watched his only son being saved by a girl. "Don't do it, little Khan," whispers the voice behind his forehead. "Don't let it happen." Temujin ignores the voice. He opens his eyes and sits bolt upright in his saddle. His fingers grip the bridle so hard that it hurts. We ride. The Khan. It has grown very quiet in the great yurt. The air is stuffy from all the people and the fire, and Temujin does not know whether it is his head or his throat that hurts more. Something invisible seems to be in the tent too. It is something without a body, something that crackles and hovers between them. It turns the silence between their words into something acrimonious, and makes the small hairs on the back of the men's hands and necks stand on end. Temujin closes his eyes and refuses to understand the excited words directed at him by one of the men, Ilan's father. Who else? He is tired like he has never been tired before. It is as if he is carrying an invisible heavy burden on his shoulders, and his shoulders no longer feel as broad and strong as he thought they had become just a few hours back. His mouth is dry from speaking for too long and too loudly. His thoughts have been replaced by a chaotic emptiness behind his forehead that not even Sarantoya's words can escape. Her whispering is different, almost unpleasant. Without realizing that he is doing it, his hand is feeling around for something to hold on to. He feels lost. A thinner, cooler hand that is somehow filled with wonderful warmth takes his and holds it. As he opens his eyes, he is looking at Arbessa's beautiful face. It looks very serious, yet in the depth of her eyes, those eyes into which he likes to dive, he can see a look of sorrow and endless empathy. It is not necessary for Arbessa to say anything to him, or even to smile at him. He can just feel the strength that she is trying to give him, and is very thankful for it. "We must decide now, Khan." Temujin turns to Ilan's father with a tired movement, and only notices as he is doing so that Ilan's father is not saying these words for the first time, and that he has said them louder and more strongly each time. He also notices that the confusion of shouts, words, and nervous movements is slowly dying down. He becomes uncomfortably aware that at least a dozen pairs of eyes are staring at him and listening to every word he says. The two dogs, who have been sitting still as two statues hewn of black basalt at his sides, listening and looking alertly, have begun to whimper. He gestures with his left hand, and they return to silence. 2 or 3 of the men who have perhaps come too close retire respectfully, their eyes filled with fear. He does not want this. He has returned from the happiest time of his life to date to celebrate the happiest day, not to hold a war council, and certainly not to get involved in this useless and dangerous struggle for power. Yet it is precisely this which he must do, he realizes sadly. Ilan's father has never been a friend of his father's, and does not like Temujin either. In fact, Temujin has always seen Ilan's father as one of those who is most likely to challenge his father for his position as Khan. "Do not let him provoke you, little Khan," whispers a voice in his thoughts. Sarantoya has not said much since he entered the camp and began this council, which has now been going on all day and will certainly continue into the night, but Temujin has felt her presence the whole time. She has listened attentively to every word that has been said, especially to the words he has said. It is as if he is afraid of what is to come. He is worried about what will happen. He does not know what it is, but it frightens him. "I know," he thinks silently. Arbessa looks at him briefly, a look that no one else notices, but which lets him know that his conversation with himself in his head has not escaped her notice. Perhaps she has been listening. More probably, she too has been speaking with her own dragon. He speaks loudly. "We must all of us keep a cool head. If we react too hastily, we may further endanger Tamer's life rather than save it." The tall, thin warrior pulls a scornful face and grunts, which would have been enough to cost him his head if Tamer were in Temujin's place. And in a way, it is as if he is in Temujin's place, despite the hours he has spent now being told by many of the warriors that he is the de facto Khan, that this is de facto his yurt, that these are his warriors who have sworn loyalty to the Khan, even if he does not want to be it. It is a grotesque situation. Yes, it is true that he has returned in order to move into this yurt one day, to take his father's carved throne one day, to become Khan one day, but not now, and not like this. The tense silence holds, and despite the fact that they have now had the same conversation perhaps a dozen times, Temujin starts to feel a change. The day is drawing to its close, and everyone here is exhausted. More than this, the men are ready to hear a decision. He asks himself how many of them would openly rally to an opponent, should one come forward to dispute his decision. "Not many," whispers Sarantoya behind his forehead, "because most of them are loyal to you. But you must make the right decision, nonetheless." That has never happened before. Temujin cannot remember Sarantoya ever having given him such a direct piece of advice before, let alone telling him what other people are thinking. She must be very worried. He is too. If he could only know which decision is the right one. Yet it will become clear in just a few moments. "Temujin, you—" Ilan's father stops himself mid-flow as he realizes that he has chosen the wrong tone of voice, and that several of the men are looking at him darkly, almost threateningly. He strokes his chin with the back of his hand nervously, and then continues in a changed tone, more respectful and yet none the less defiant. "My Khan, I do not wish to seem disrespectful, but do let me speak openly." "Go ahead," says Temujin. Ilan's father remains silent for far longer than everyone expects. Temujin can see that he is considering every word carefully. "I do not wish to offend you, Khan." "Temujin," interrupts Temujin. "You are welcome to keep calling me Temujin." Is this the wrong decision? A flicker of triumph surges into the man's eyes. "Temujin," nods the warrior. "You know your father better than anyone here, so I do not need to tell you how he would have reacted if you had been taken and he was standing here." Temujin tries not to, but he can see his father's face again, the sorrow and contempt as he sees his son being beaten on the riverbank. "Well, how would he have reacted?" asks Arbessa. The rage that surges into the eyes of the warrior cannot escape notice, yet Temujin is not able to say if this is due to what Arbessa has said or just due to the fact that she has dared to enter the fray. Apart from her, there are only men in the yurt, and women are not allowed in the war council. Yet Arbessa followed him into the tent as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and he only now realizes that this must have felt like a slap in the face to many men like Ilan's father. Yet it is too late to do anything about this now. "Be quiet, child," hisses the warrior. "When men are talking, women are—" "Arbessa," interrupts Temujin, not loudly but sharply, "is my bride, and will soon be your ruler. You shall speak to her in a more respectful tone." The dogs growl in agreement and bare their teeth. Temujin does not hold them back this time. The man stares at him, the smouldering rage in his eyes burning brighter, and Temujin sees that it is probably nothing more than the presence of his huge fighting dogs that is keeping Ilan's father from acting on his impulses. "What if," thinks Temujin angrily, "I were to just let them loose and watch them do their job, which is to protect me and to tear my enemies to shreds?" At this moment, however, Chuzir stands on the other side, next to Arbessa, and lets his hand fall loudly onto the handle of his sword, hanging in his belt. It is just a gesture, nothing more, yet it suffices to fill Temujin's heart with warmth and strength. "Our Khan," answers Ilan's father in a deliberate and carefully respectful tone, "would have done what any true Khan would do. He would have called his men to arms and let these cowards have the answer they deserve." "And what would be this answer?" asks Temujin. "We must go and free our Khan." "Yet did you not yourself just call Temujin Khan?" asks Arbessa. Temujin does not say anything, but he sighs inside. She may be right, but she is walking on thin ice. "Who is your new Khan, the man to whom you owe allegiance, as long as Temujin's father is not here?" "Yes," answers the warrior, "and I shall obey him." He then turns to Temujin. "We are talking about the life of your father here, my Khan, and the honour of our tribe. Tamer will not be happy if he returns to find that we have behaved as cowards." The men in the yurt murmur in agreement, and Temujin can almost feel the change in what they now expect him to decide. Whether he is a boy or not, Temujin has just been insulted by Ilan's father, and he cannot accept that. It is no sign of cowardice to avoid a fight that one cannot win, he says, quoting his father. "The Tartars are great in number, and they will know that we are coming." He raises his hand to stop Ilan's father contradicting him, and continues in a deliberately commanding tone. "We all know how weak the Tartars are. They are no match for us, and we could win against them. Yet they would kill my father. Is that what you want?" 2 or 3 of the men make frightened noises, and Temujin's opponent drops his hand to his sword and then relaxes it. He speaks respectfully despite the fury inside him. "No, of course not, my Khan," he whispers. "So, what do you wish to do?" "I have decided," answers Temujin loudly and in a clear voice, so that everyone may hear him, "that we shall wait until the messenger returns whom you sent to the Tartars. We shall hear their conditions. Should they demand a ransom, then we shall pay it if we are able." "And if we are not?" asks the warrior. "Then I shall go to them myself and negotiate his release personally," replies Temujin. Not only Ilan's father, but also Chuzir and many other warriors look at him astonished and almost incredulous. Only the warmth in Arbessa's eyes seems to grow. "Should I not return," he answers after a short pregnant pause, "then you will have to decide what to do." "My Khan!" shouts one of the men, his voice sounding more disbelieving than angry. "That will not help your father." "This is the coward's way," adds another. "We are warriors, not wenches, who can be traded like pawns." There is a brief moment when it looks as if the mood may turn. Temujin can almost feel people rallying to Ilan's father, and he can almost see his father's disapproving look. His father has not only seen his son beaten, but now how he is losing his tribe. This has never happened for as long as there have been Khans. "Silence!" he shouts. Is he tricking himself? Or can he hear the roar of huge invisible wings throwing their shadow over the men. I know what you are thinking. I too feel it. Yet there is no honour in spilling innocent blood when there is another path to take. I am no more a coward than any of you, and if there is no other choice, of course we shall take our weapons and free Tamar. Yet we shall try the way of the word before we take that of the sword. I have decided so, and you shall obey me." The invisible wings spread further. Something is stirring in him, the power of the dragon that is part of him. It is the legacy of his father, which he now understands for the first time not to be the strength in his sword arm, nor the accuracy of his bow, but something different and far more important. Once again, there is an unpleasant silence. Everyone stares at him, most of them disbelieving, astonished, or angry. A few of them, perhaps, in agreement. Then Ilan's father speaks quietly, disdainfully, and looking at Arbessa out of the corner of his eyes. "Now we are ruled by women and children." Temujin slaps him in the face. It is absurd. The warrior is more than a head taller than him, and 10 times as strong, and a part of him knows that this is just the moment his opponent has been waiting for. Several men suck their teeth, and others lower their hands to their swords and daggers. Ilan's father takes a step back and begins to draw his sword. Suddenly, a big black form growls, leaps, and sinks its teeth into his arm. The man screams, roaring as he falls back, and tries to use his other arm to hit the dog, but it is no use, as the second dog has taken his other hand. Deep in Temujin, the dragon stirs, stretches its claws, and for a moment Temujin is sure that the warrior can see her. He is sure that he can see into her eyes, and can see something that shakes him to the depth of his soul and fills his heart with fear, a fear so dark that it makes him forget the black beasts biting at his arms. Time seems to become slower as Temujin sees in fantastic clarity how one of the dogs lets his arm drop and goes for his neck. He wants the dog to bite. For a moment, for a short, terrible moment, he wants it to bite. Wants nothing more than to see his fighting dogs tear this man to pieces, this man who has dared to challenge him, the Khan, the ruler of this tribe, this man who has dared to insult him and his bride. He can see his father again, the expression in his eyes as he watched his son's most shameful moment, and perhaps this is what he owes his father, what his father expects of him. Perhaps he should spill the blood of his enemy, let the entire tribe see his life be taken, see that the rule of the stronger is still law. It is in him, this power that is almost the power of a dragon, an ancient power that seeks blood and triumph and knows no mercy. This is what Sarantoya means when she has talked about the paths he can take. He does not even have to do anything. He must only wait one more heartbeat, and the fangs of his dogs will do it for him. He will be Khan. "No!" he shouts. "Heel!" The dog's teeth close on the man with a noise that sounds like a bear trap snapping shut. Yet it is not his throat that the dog bites, but a patch of skin just under it. The second dog lets go of the man's bleeding arm and returns to Temujin. "No," says Temujin, now more quietly, almost to himself. "No, that is not our path." Once again, it is as if time has slowed. Countless eyes are staring at him. Many of the men are astounded, shocked, completely helpless. Each one is waiting for him to draw his sword and finish it himself. Instead, Temujin does something that surprises himself more than anyone else. He stops the tempting, dark whispering inside himself, drops his hand from his sword, and goes to the man to help him up. Ilan's father looks at him, confused and scared, yet he takes his hand and stands up, swaying on his feet. His eyes no longer burn with triumph and fury, but are a sea of uncertainty. He stands there for a moment, looking down at Temujin, before picking up his sword. He returns it to his sheath, tired. He sinks his head and speaks with real respect. "Yes, my Khan, I shall obey you. And one day you will understand me too," adds Temujin in his thoughts. He tries to smile at the man in his eyes, but the warrior avoids his gaze. He seems shocked. Perhaps he understands before Temujin that it is this moment that has made the boy into the Khan, whether his father returns or not. "You may go now," he says to everyone loudly after a pause. "Keep watch for the messenger and tell me the instant he arrives. It has been a long day, and we all need peace and rest." The sound of huge beating wings and sharp claws accompanies his every word, but he can feel the tension dropping at the same time. One after another, the men turn and go. Finally, Ilan's father is almost alone with them. He looks at Temujin, then at Arbessa, then again at Temujin, and goes, leaving the couple to themselves. The dogs are at Temujin's side. Only Chuzir is left. He looks at Temujin in a way that makes him shiver. "Thank you," says Temujin. "What for?" asks Chuzir. The sound of his voice frightens Temujin even more than the look in his eyes. "For being on my side," he answers. "I do not know what would have happened without you." "You are my brother in oath," replies Chuzir. This is not the answer that Temujin wants to hear, but he also feels how pointless it would be to say another word. He nods silently, and Chuzir understands that he now wishes to be alone with Arbessa. He turns away obediently, but stops after a few paces and turns to them. Was he right? About what? "That you have been too long with the other tribe," says Chuzir. These words hurt Temujin deeply, but he does not show it. Instead, he shakes his head and smiles, as if Chuzia has said something silly but forgivable. "No," he replies. Nothing more. Chuzia seems even more disappointed, but turns and leaves. "That was incredibly brave of you," says Arbessa. Was it? Or is he right? Arbessa lays her hand softly on his shoulder. "One day he will understand you. He is your brother in oath, and more importantly, he is your friend. Give him time." Temujin is almost ashamed, and is just able to stop himself from pushing away her hand. "I hope I am wrong, but I feel like I have destroyed what makes my people special." Arbessa laughs strangely at this. "You have only destroyed what makes them bad. They will understand you. You will become a great Khan who rules not by the sword, but by wisdom." Yet, is this really wisdom? Temujin takes a few steps back from her, and Arbessa lets her hand drop. She is disappointed, yet her eyes still smile at him. "You need time too," she says. "Your people are known for their peaceful nature," he answers, "which I admire and envy. But my people are not like this, not like yours." "Yet we too were once like you," replies Arbessa, "until the dragons showed us the right way. Have you never asked yourselves how we were able to live in peace with our neighbours? Why your father and mine are friends, despite the fact that Tamer has attacked so many other tribes and robbed them of their women, their animals, and their treasure?" As he tries to answer, she talks further. "I know what you want to say. There is no honour in attacking a tribe of cowards," she says, quoting him in scornful tone. "But we are no more cowards than you. That is what you have felt, Temujin. It is the power of the dragons that protects us. You have just learned something very important, my love, and I am happy for you." "What have I learned?" asks Temujin. Arbessa does not answer, but the silent voice of Sarantoya answers him for her. "If you had done what the men wanted and drawn your sword, you would have lost me." "Yet you won the fight for me, not I," answers Temujin silently. He did not just imagine the dragon's powerful force in his heart. He really has her power, her invincibility, just as much as anyone else here, including Ilan's father. Sarantoya bent the will of the men, not him. "That is not true," answers the dragon. Her voice sounds as if she is slightly amused, but it is warm and proud too. "It was your power that they felt. You have always had it. I only showed you how you can best use it, and I am